Good morning, everybody. Yes, I haven't got a music opener to my opener yet. I tried, and last time I got something, it still gave me a content ID. I don't know what I'm going to do here, so I will figure
You need
something
to
out eventually.
use
Your
you
music.
need to use Sav FK. Sav
Yeah, I
FK is
checked into that.
awesome. Go check him out. He's fantastic. I use him. He's wonderful. He's a wonderful person as far as I know. I've had very one comment interaction with him, but his music is
He doesn't
great.
kick puppies. He's not a puppy kicker.
Probably not. I mean, I don't know the guy personally, but probably not.
Yeah, I'll find
His music
something.
is too good. There's no way he kicks puppies.
Well,
That's how
it's
that works, right?
the stuff that I normally use. It's all of a sudden this third party is trying to do these content ideas, not just with me, it's other content creators too, and it's on the YouTube library too, the audio free music. Not no they could use it, and then all of a sudden people are using it, and I guess this person decided to say, look, I no longer want it in the public domain, and I'm going to copy, put a content ID so he gets all the revenue. I don't know. But anyways, make sure people can hear us. Welcome, buddy. Let us know if the audio levels are fine. I'm looking at them. They seem cool. I know you guys are going to really be like, oh my God, Steve's talking about this again. Yes, I am. And there's significant reasons to, which we're going to be showing you why. So basically,
Okay, I'm gonna be the one giving Steve shit for talking about this again.
yeah, that's why I brought her on for it. She has one job. That's to give me shit. So, so anyways, the other day, somebody put a clip up of Matt Dillahunty once again talking mad smack about me, lying about me, getting my positions wrong, and fundamentally misunderstanding everything that I've done the last couple years. I mean, just fundamentally misunderstanding. He just doesn't get my positions, even though I have them on my Great Debate Community page, right? I have a page that says, Steve McCrae's position to alleviate or abate, straw mans, because I'm sick of being straw man, because all Matt Dillahunty does is straw man me. He has never once addressed anything that I've said, ever. He just thinks that he knows my positions because other people have told him certain things that are not freaking true. And so he just goes by it rather than actually bothers to learn what my positions actually are, right? And so he was on this Twitch stream the other day, and he's just like telling people that I'm a prescriptivist, right? That I somehow prescribe linguistic usages to terms that makes them correct or not. And that is bullshit, okay? I've never been a prescriptivist. I am a descriptivist. And what that basically boils down to, a prescriptivist would be somebody that says, look, this is how these words are used in English. You must use this way, a.k.a. a grammar Nazi, for lack of better putting it. They don't accept neologisms. They don't accept, words are certainly used differently. I do. I've been the one that the last 2 years explaining
I don't
words
think
are
I've
used
ever
polysemously.
met. I don't think I've ever met somebody who is a prescriptivist.
Well, unfortunately,
I don't think I have.
I think I have to say Aaron Ra tends to be a prescriptivist, because I actually have a thing, and I'll try to show it, in his blog when he wrote again for Mr. Agnostic, which was me. He actually said there's only one correct usage of atheism, right? That's prescriptivism. But that's literally what prescriptivism is saying there's only one correct usage, right? Which I don't adhere
but
to.
Is Aaron actually a prescriptivist, or does he think that in this one situation?
It's probably local to this one situation.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of somebody who would be a prescriptivist consistently, and I don't think I'd met anybody. I feel like you would run into some I don't think that would be a very good or a difficult argument or position to defend. But
well, I mean, I don't think I know any off the top of my head. I can't say that I do. But I mean, I'm sure there's some linguists out there, some really grammar people that are like, you must use these words this way. I'm like, look, I'm the first person to not be critical of people's grammar or spelling. I'm not that great of spelling.
He hangs out with me, so.
Yeah, I mean, I have just a few people that check my spelling every so often in grammar. Like my Intriguing Feline does a beautiful job of it. Thank you for that. But I mean, for the most part, I like get the point across, right? Just tell me what you think. And I have been arguing for years that certain terms are polysemous, when other people on the other side say, no, you have to use it like this because this is what the words mean. There's some intrinsic meaning to it of some kind, right? And I'm the one been telling people, no, in philosophy, these are normative usages, but you don't have to use them that way. But if you don't, let's see what happens when you don't. That's an argument, right? Let's see what happens when you don't. But Matt Dillahunty has never once looked into anything that I've said. What happens if you use these terms this way, the way he uses it? He just says, look, like, for example, my last video on Matt, you cannot be neither theist nor atheist. Well, we know that's bullshit. He knows that's bullshit. Now, granted, using his terminology, his usages, okay, sure. You're a theist or an atheist. Okay, great. I can say that I can say a dog means non-theist, which means you're either a theist or a dog. Okay, that's just semantics. But for him lying to people continually, what? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Super chat.
Helios 575 says, I have to come clean. Steve pays me to pick on Chesh in retaliation for her giving him shit. By the way, how goes your roof trimming, Chesh? You with that roof trimming?
Yeah,
Swear
he's
to
not
God.
lying. That's true.
I haven't been on. We were gonna stream Minecraft this Wednesday, but we ended up not doing it because there's a bunch of background stuff that needed to get dealt with, and I was just like, I need to focus on this thing. We will come back to Minecraft next week.
I gotta start playing Minecraft. I gotta get back into that.
Yeah, come play with us.
I will, I promise. So anyways, I'm the one that's being anti-prescriptive, right? I am like, I've been saying, look, I have 8 I put up, when I did my presentation for, epistemology in a video about atheism and stuff like that, I actually had 8 different usages and definitions of atheism. Oh, take your pick. I don't give a shit. I'm not saying you have to use one of them. I've never said that you must use the way that I use it, that you must use it the way the academic normative usage of these terms. You don't have to. Okay? I don't tell creationists you have to use theory to mean, a well-substantiated body of evidence, right? I don't tell them you have to use species the way we understand it in biology. They can use it any way they want. But if they do use it differently, let's examine it. Why is that any different here? Right? I don't understand.
It's not. It's just a different argument. A lot of it is just misunderstanding. You're not trying to argue against atheism, and you're not trying to argue against theism. You're not even arguing the semantics. What you're arguing is that if you use these terms in this way, it creates problems in this way. I'm not telling you don't use these ones. However, be aware of these problems so that way when somebody brings up these issues, you're not, one, just brushing them off and making your argument look really bad, but 2, you actually have an answer. And that answer doesn't necessarily have to even be like, oh, I'm going to go in depth and talk about this. It could just be, well, yeah, no, we understand that problem. However, we're not dealing with that issue here, like on this show or about this. But go find answers here. Or like, if we don't, you can choose to ignore the problem. You can choose to be like, but don't tell people when they bring up the problem that they're wrong for bringing up the issue. Like, you're brushing off something that is a legitimate argument and weakening your own position. Ilya Moving for 5 says, why do the haters never really look at the facts and information, but rather make up bullshit to excuse their behavior? Anyway, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Yeah, well, to answer that question, because
Cue Helios.
What?
I said cue Helios.
There's 2 reasons probably for that. One, either they don't understand my arguments, or 2, they just rather straw man because they're easy to defeat a straw man, right? If you build up this effigy, say, look, Steve thinks this way, he's just wrong. First of all, that's a straw man because everything Matt has said is wrong about my positions. He doesn't get my positions. And 2, just by saying you're wrong by fiat, what does that mean? Give me some evidence why I'm wrong, right? Which, by the way, I asked a poll, and I'll get to that. How many people have seen Matt Dillahunty ever show that I'm wrong by using any evidence rather than just having this effigy? I think it was 122 people voted. It was about, I don't know what it was. How many percent is it? I have it down here. Here we go. So 22%. Okay, so 131 votes. So I don't know, was that about 30 people, give or take? But none of them, not one of them in this thread showed any evidence of that. And I even said in the thread, and I'll show this
Can
here.
you show me? That'd be great. If yes. Matt actually did, please show us so we can actually have the actual conversation instead of just shit flinging, which is what's happening.
I put it in here. I hope you guys on the outside can read this because I'm display sharing. But it says, if yes, show me. Let's see how many yeses there are and how many people backed that up with evidence. Do you know how many people backed it up with evidence? 0. Absolutely freaking 0. Matt Dillahunty has never cited me a paper on anything. Not once.
It's readable. I just double checked.
Okay, and what he does argue that against, I'm not disagreeing with him on because he's just built up some straw man, right? Because I'm not a prescriptivist. I don't say you have to use these usages, but he tells people this is the way it is. There is no other way. Steve's just wrong by fiat. He's never acknowledged once Steve is correct in regards to how it is normatively understood in philosophy, when other people have said that quite frequently, and they have told him this. People that know him have said, why do you keep saying Steve's wrong on this? He's actually explaining it really freaking decently, I would say even better than that, of these topics and educating people on these topics. Why do you say he's wrong on this? Matt uses these words differently. Okay, great. I accept that. Whatever. But he can't say that I'm wrong for using it the way it's normally used in the field of philosophy. These are philosophical terminologies. I mean, I'm just at a loss here. And so what he does is he has to change the argument or he has to vilify me. And enough. It's bullshit, Matt. It's fucking bullshit. He's actually tried to character assassinate me on many, many channels by saying I'm just this, different person than I actually am, but I'm saying things I'm not saying when I literally have them written down, and he still gets them wrong for 2 fucking years. I mean,
Godless Scummer for 5 says, "Hi guys, when you get off stream, check your DMs. I have a little challenge for both of you." Sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'm not going to check my DMs with my Twitter open here because I know what you usually send me, and I'll get kicked off YouTube.
I actually saw it just before. I didn't have enough time to read through it, but I glanced it. It seems like it might be interesting. Somebody mentioned, we've got somebody in the chat named Jimmy Matthew so they're talking about the linguistics of the word atheist. So that is a semantic argument.
Literally.
Right? You're talking about the linguistics and how you build a word using prefixes and such. So what he actually said was, the evidence is in the linguistic usage of the prefix a before a term. In English, it means not or without. So we understand the linguistics. Nobody is saying you can't use the word in that term in that way. At no point is anybody saying that Matt is incorrect to use the term that he's using. What we're saying is when you use that term in that way, you run into different problems. And some of those problems are social problems, and some of those problems are philosophical problems, and some of those problems are logic, like hard logic issues. Now, the answer that the reason why this is a problem isn't because of the discussion that we're trying to have. It's that when people bring this up to Matt, or when people bring this now back up to Steve, they're saying that Steve is wrong by fiat, or they're saying that Steve is wrong because Matt Dillahunty said he's wrong. But at no point have we ever been able to find or see the actual argument being addressed. It just keeps getting brushed off as being semantics when it's not a semantic argument. It's not about it. You can call it a cat and a dog, and that's fine. We're not saying you can't call it a cat and a dog. We're just saying, however, if you describe a cat as a dog, you're running into an error, like a category error, where you've got something that's got 2 definitions that aren't. You're missing a part. You've taken a part out.
So let's address what he said here. The A is called the Greek alpha privative. Okay, so it is a prefix, right? It can mean not or without. This is true. What they keep saying is it generally means without, because that's the etymological roots of the word, right? So atheos, the without gods, is the etymological root of that word. However, to say that the uses of that term in modernity is an etymological fallacy. There's what's called synchronic and there's dichronic usages. Synchronic usage is how the word's actually used nowadays. Dichronic is over the history of period of time. If you look dichronically over the history of the root of the word atheism, yes, you can go back to be it without. But if you actually look in the French, it's actually more of the negation. But the not, the A as a not, right? Because if you look at Stanford Encyclopedia, if you look at Cambridge Encyclopedia, they're very explicit on this. That in the word atheism, in modernity, in the field of philosophy, it is normative that is thought of as not and not as without. And what they mean by that, again, concepts, what they mean by not is that if you have the proposition of theism, which is God exists, it is the negation of that, the belief of the negation of that, which is if God exists, the negation is it is not the case that God exists, or simply God does not exist. So atheism would be the belief that God does not exist. Now that is normative. You don't have to accept that as your usages. Like Matt doesn't accept that as his usages. But I've never heard him once say, yes, Steve is correct. That is how it's best understood and normatively understood in philosophy. And what happens is these people listen to him and go, oh, wait, Matt's right on this. There's only no other way. Because like my last video where he's like, well, you can't be anything but theist or atheist. Well, sure, if you define it that way, but that's a semantic argument. I am clearly neither theist nor atheist. In philosophy, that's completely congruent, right? It's congruent with the understanding of these terms in philosophy. I've never once heard Matt say, yes, Steve is right on that, right? Never once. But I've never prescriptively said, you must adhere to these things. Ever. Not
Yeah,
once.
it's a matter of saying that Matt is making a semantic argument, and here are the issues in using a semantic argument in this situation. And like I said, some of them are social, some of them are issues, as in like you're teaching people something that isn't entirely correct, and then they're coming over to people like Steve later trying to speak like they know what they're talking about, or they're going over to try and have discussions with theists, and they're making really poor arguments because like the catalyst and the issues. Now, we're not saying that Matt necessarily has to change that. That's just an issue that arises when you do things like this.
Yeah, I mean, how many people?
So we have to sit around and have this conversation fucking over and over and over again.
How many people that have listened to me for years has ever said, hey, look, you know what? You're not a true atheist. You're an agnostic. I've never made that argument ever to anybody, right? I say, look, these are how these words are used. Normatively in philosophy, you want to use it, that's fine. But there are such standards like, hey, if you don't believe either way, that's called agnostic on P, right? That's not a label. Right? I'm not saying you have to be an agnostic. What I'm saying is that is what agnostic on P is understood as, right? That means that you don't have a position either way on the proposition. That's normative. You can go look at that. It's objective, right? Again, evidence. Matt always talks about evidence, but he's provided none ever of anything. And yet I have so many citations that he just blindly throws that out the window going, oh, that's just an appeal to authority. These are academic citations about the normativity of these terms. You don't have to accept them. I don't care about that. What I do care is you say that's not normative in the field. Bullshit. Bullshit. That's demonstrably false. I accept those terms as I use them in the field because I don't think they lead to any kind of logical ambiguity or imprecision or worse, category errors, which I think describing things in the weak case does. But Matt's never addressed that argument. And he's never addressed the argument that a theist can go, oh, wait, a theist is anybody who just lacks a belief that God doesn't exist. He hasn't addressed that argument either. He just says, you're wrong, Steve. Bullshit. I call Matt Dillahunty out. So bullshit.
That's the problem, right? He's not wrong to use whatever definition he wants to use. And he's also not wrong to say that when I define it this way, this is what I mean. Also fine. Yeah. Nothing wrong with saying I get to use the term however I want. Absolutely. What is wrong, Steve's a liar. Steve doesn't have a good argument without saying why Steve doesn't have a good argument, and Steve is wrong. The thing is that Steve isn't wrong. How do I know this? I've literally watched this for like the past year and a half of watching this goddamn argument going on. And the thing is that
looked into it too.
Matt is treating Steve's argument like it's a semantic argument when Matt Dillahunty's argument is a semantic argument. So he thinks that Steve I'm speaking for him a little bit. I am speculating. Let me make that clear. I don't know what's in Matt Dillahunty's head. It seems to me that he is using a linguistic semantic argument. So he is responding to Steve as if Steve is also making a semantic linguistic argument when he's not. He's making an argument more about the issues that you run into by using a semantic argument, or the issues that you run into when you're discussing with theists. And to make this a more broad actual discussion, but Matt doesn't seem to want to engage in that discussion. Right. So he strawmans what Steve is saying to strengthen his own semantic argument by saying that Steve is making a semantic argument when he's not, and thus making the entire argument whenever anybody else tries to run it weaker.
That's exactly right. I mean, exactly on the money, right? I mean, I have I'm doing a. Yeah, she's been doing this for so long. She's got this down to an art form. And you know what? Other people have as well. I've noticed so many people in the last 2 years have gotten really good at this stuff because they pay attention and they've looked into it on their own, right? And I'm sure that people have told Matt that I'm not wrong on this, but I don't think he cares. I at this point think he's outright lying. I don't even think it's a matter of misunderstanding. I think he's lying because people have explained to him, I'm not a prescriptivist. People have said, hey, Steve explains this stuff really well. And, if you go look into it, he's not wrong. But you keep getting his positions wrong, right? And so at this point, I'm just going to call it straight out dishonesty, which is a lie. But the whole thing stems from the fact that he has to have a political agenda, right? He wants to get as many people under that umbrella of atheism as possible. But when I asked the question, which I did before, hey, is it a metaphysical necessity that one person has to be either theist or atheist, right? It is a metaphysical necessity that you have to be theist or not theist. That's a dichotomy, right? It is either the case or not the case in classical logic. We all get that. But there's no metaphysical or logical entailment that you have to be theist or atheist. None. I've asked people, show me a proof of that. Nobody can do it because it's just a semantic game at that point. It's not a logical entailment.
Well, then nobody's argument is better than the other ones, and there is no reason to use one definition over the other one, and the whole thing doesn't really matter. You might be able to make arguments down the line about what is more conducive to the layman, which is what Matt is doing. He's using a definition. Yeah, he's got the utility argument, and that's a fine argument to make. That's an actual discussion that could be had.
Yes.
You could actually have a discussion about that. Why doesn't Matt have that discussion?
I don't know. I had
you see what I'm saying? Like funny. That would be something productive.
I agree with you, and it's funny you mentioned that because literally today in the Atheist Experience group, I had one person in how long? Genetically modified skeptic was the only person I've seen really run this argument, and I agree with them, by the way. I mean, I don't think it's a strong argument to convince me, but it's not a horror bad argument, right? If that's your goal, right? It has to do with your goals, and so it's a utility argument. But a person did exactly say what you just said, Chesh. It was a utility argument, and it's for political power and to get people under the atheism and normativity of the term and to normalize it. And I understand that, right? But Matt doesn't even explain that to people. He just says by fiat this is the case.
I don't think he actually acknowledges it, to be honest.
Really?
It doesn't seem like he like, not when he's talking about you in this situation. He might, in other places, he might acknowledge that is the case and that is what he's doing, and that's good, fantastic, do that. But when he's talking about whatever your argument is, or whenever he's strawmanning you, he just dismisses the utility argument entirely, whereas that would actually be an appropriate response to what you're actually saying, but he doesn't do that, which is bizarre. Like, we're not trying to fling shit at you, dude. We're trying to have a conversation. You're
literally steel manning him, which is great. I mean, we like steel manning because I don't get steel manned, I get straw manned. So,
right.
Read what Julia said, if you can, real quick, because I think that's.
Which one? Matt's claim is the positive claim that God's that one.
Yeah. Would you please?
So Matt's claim is the positive claim that gods don't exist equals anti-theist is terrible at the best of times.
I don't think I've heard Matt say that. Really? Because I've had other people. I know Richard Richardson, who's I'm going to have a discussion with probably next week, who's the head of the Atheist International in Canada, something or other. We're going to have this discussion. He thinks anti-theism is the position that gods don't exist. I disagree with him on that vehemently. I think he's absolutely wrong on that because I've never seen anti-theist normatively used that way. I've seen infringe, maybe, but anti-theism tends to be the position against the belief that God exists or against religions, one or the other. But just merely believing that God does not exist, to me, is not an anti-theist position. I think there's a differentiation to be had. And I think combining them together seems odd to me.
I can kind of see where Helios is coming from. I think he's saying that or the way you could interpret what Matt is doing. He's trying to lump in people who aren't anti-theist under a bigger umbrella to have more of them to apply whenever he's talking about like why religion is bad. So he can inflate the numbers in kind of that way. Maybe I can see how you can. I don't necessarily think he's saying or doing that in particular, but
it was the same thing.
I can see how it could be interpreted that way. Somebody made. I do want to address this, and then I got something from Jimmy Matthew, something that Jimmy Matthew said that I want to ask.
Sure.
That they're asking you essentially that I think would be good to clear up.
Well, hang on.
Somebody was saying that.
This one first, because this one's only take 2 seconds.
Yeah, go for it.
That one seems more important. So just don't forget it. Can you read what Philly Joe just said?
I wrote it down.
Okay, Philly Joe, read what Philly Joe said.
Either you believe or you don't believe, bottom line.
Yeah, it's true. Classical logic.
There's zero in between.
Yeah, classical logic. We all agree about. Yay! Okay, that's called ignoranto elenchi, which basically means yes, that's the case, but you're arguing something nobody's arguing against. We agree. Move on. I don't know why people say this is exactly the reason I wanted to bring that up is that's exactly what Matt Dillahunty said to me on Twitter one time. Either you believe or you don't believe, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree. Whatever. Yeah. What is your point here? Was I asked Matt, and he couldn't explain what his point was because we were talking about multi-valued logics at the time, anyways. But I was like, what is your point? Yes, we all agree upon that. Yay! All right, go ahead. What was somebody was saying that it's frustrating having this conversation over and over again, and why we're talking about this again, especially since Rez had called in on Monday saying like we're still having this doesn't seem productive. Why are we still talking about this, et cetera, et cetera. I agree. I would much rather there is an argument to be made that this is dumb as fuck. It is.
However, it is one. You're right.
I agree with that.
Two, this is an interesting topic if you can actually get past what's happening currently. If we can get past this, there are interesting discussions you could have about the utility of one term versus another term, or whether or not, or you could strengthen your own argument and say like, hey, this is useful, this is not useful, and I'm using it this way because of these specific reasons in this specific argument, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could get to that point, but right now we can't get to that point.
We can't even get to first base. It doesn't
even have to be. Well, right. It can't even be with. It doesn't, like, this argument doesn't have to be with Matt. Matt does not have to have this discussion with us if he does not want to. However, when he goes around saying shit that's not true, this is why I'm still here having this conversation. I'm very sympathetic towards Steve in this case because he just constantly is saying that this is not what's being said. And so I can kind of understand where Steve is coming from, wanting to discuss this, because literally people come from Matt has a large following. So when somebody with a large following runs an argument and says your argument doesn't apply because you're this person or because this straw man, and that is not the thing that you've been saying, we run into problems. This is why this discussion happens on Steve's Twitter all the time. He writes a blog, people don't read the blog and come to argue with him about it. Or like he says something on Modern Day Debate saying, well, this is my position on it. And they go, well, you're wrong because you're Steve and this is your opinion. And Steve's like, that's not what I was saying.
Yeah, every time.
And
worse is that there's a
I
lot
would
of
rather
people,
be painting my toenails.
There's a lot of
got
people,
my fingers done.
But there's a lot of people, because he doesn't explain these things to people very well, and so they only hear what they think they hear, and they don't understand the concept. So they'll come to me and say, Steve, hey, look, man, you either believe or you don't believe. Okay, I agree. Steve, you have to be a theist or an atheist. No, that's wrong. Oh, Steve, you're an idiot. Well, what the fuck? I'm like, do you understand that you're just fundamentally wrong on that? I mean, there's an objective fact of the matter to be had on that, right?
It doesn't work that way. So Helios 575.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. Helios 57545 says, I had a Twitter conversation a while ago, and someone linked a 4-year-old YouTube video where he had said that when I asked Matt's actual position is. Oh, he linked you a 4-year-old video when you asked what Matt's position was?
Matt believes all gods are bullshit. He's a strong atheist if you really narrow him down, I think. I've heard him say it years ago in the Atheist Experience. That he believes
I think that's
gods.
fine.
Yeah.
So we got something from Jimmy Matthew that I think is pertinent to touch on, and maybe you can explain. So I just don't see why not having a position is the same thing as a person without theism. I don't get it. Do you think you could explain that maybe?
Sure. Okay, so without theism seems weird to me, right? I mean, it's without the belief of God.
Yeah, he
right?
put it in quotes. He was saying like without theism.
Okay, so even if you don't have if you there's either you believe or you don't believe, right? Don't believe is still a position on the proposition with respect to it. It's called second order proposition because it's not directly saying that the proposition is true or false, but it's something other than that with respect to the proposition, like suspending judgment, right? So there's 3 main epistemic dispositions towards a proposition: believes it true, disbelieves it, which means believes in negation, or suspend judgment on it. Ostensibly, let's go with those 3. So typically the theist will believe the proposition God exists. The atheist will typically say that God does not exist. They believe the negation. In philosophy, this is how it's framed, okay? Now, I'm not saying that this is where Matt makes a huge mistake. I'm not saying atheists who don't hold to that are no longer atheists. I've never argued that. Ever. Stop saying that I do, because it's never fucking happened. And the agnostic is somebody who just basically says, I have no position either way, that it's not true or false. So even though they're somebody who does not believe, theist or not theist, all atheists and all agnostics are non-theist, right? They don't believe. But they're also non-atheist either, if you want to look at it that way and framed that way in that schema from a philosophical aspect.
Yeah. So to clarify, something that they tend to use is weak atheism and strong atheism. An agnostic would usually fall under the weak atheism position, usually, not always. Usually would fall under that term. But the thing is that is a weird, bizarre term that kind of only exists because the atheist Austin is using it for reasons.
Well, the weak atheist, weak atheism really kind of started as negative atheism with Martin and Flew, right? So if you read Presumption of Atheism,
but didn't Flu's not that Flew didn't fly though, right?
Well, yeah, no, his arguments were crap, and they've long nobody really took them seriously, and they've been really thoroughly, I think, debunked. If you go read Burgett's Jackson, Dr. Jackson's paper, 2017. He did a really good job on explaining why the presumption of atheism is flawed. But at least Flew acknowledged in his paper, hey, look, right now in the academic world, atheism is standard, basically. It's typical to be the belief that God does not exist, right? In the positive epistemic status. Flew acknowledged this way back in 72. He just wanted to change it to negative atheism, which Martin did as well, Dr. Michael Martin. Dr. George Smith, A Case Against God, he called it explicit and implicit atheism. All kind of very similar terms. But they weren't arguing that this is not how it is in philosophy. They like I said, Flew explicitly said, this is how it's understood in philosophy as a strong case, but we wanted to change it to negative case. But most philosophers didn't buy his argument. It was not well received back in 1972. And it's still not to this day, because it leads to epistemic problems. It leads to category errors. It leads to a whole slew of things, all of which I've addressed in my blog, none of which Matt has ever addressed. Not once.
So Kimono brought up, quote, "We define atheism as the lack of belief in gods. This definition also encompasses what most people call agnosticism," end quote, ACA.
That's the ACA.
So
that's their disclaimer. Which,
that's the
by the way, they're allowed to do that. But that's not how it is
there's no
in
problem
philosophy.
with that.
Okay, what's the problem?
But it's kind of I find it bizarre, especially like rewatching Atheist Experience now, in that there's a strange position, like a lot of the time, and they don't have to, but the majority of the time when they have people calling in, they don't actually demonstrate or argue as to why they don't believe in a god. They just say, well, I don't believe you, or that's not good enough evidence to meet my standard, but without actually ever saying what it doesn't prepare people very well to actually present themselves and their own argument as to why God doesn't exist. It's just more, it seems to be a more agnostic position and to be arguing from, to me. Maybe that's just the way I'm interpreting. Maybe it's just the way I'm understanding it. But like, it's just, if you're constantly saying, well, I don't believe you because that it doesn't meet my expectation of what we should or should not see, that's a fine argument, but it doesn't tell me anything as to why to not believe in a god in general. It's not a good argumentation that way.
Yeah. So people are talking about the agnosticism position. There are three main uses of the term agnosticism. Okay, one is, and I've explained this a million times.
No, Steve. No. You're a prescriptivist. There can't be three.
Yeah, really, right? Yeah. There's only one correct usage. So there's three understandings. There's the normative epistemic principle, which Thomas Henry Huxley came up with, which is basically very similar to scientific methodology. I think it's very similar to logical positivism, but whatever. But that's kind of archaic. Nobody really uses it in that term. Okay. But the other way would be as an epistemological proposition, which is the knowability of gods. And this is where it gets confusing, because even if you address it as the knowability of gods, that's still a belief position. It is the belief that gods are knowable or not. The belief that gods are knowable or not. It's not knowledge, right? It's not knowing that gods exist or not. It's not me saying I know God exists or I know God does not exist. It is about the belief that I know that God does not exist, right? So I believe, let's say, like, I believe that gods are unknowable. You can call that agnosticism in the epistemological sense. You can say that that you believe gods are knowable. That's still agnosticism, but it's hard agnosticism rather than soft agnosticism. I'm fine with that. That's okay. Whatever. Those are in the epistemological realm. But
it's almost like it's a spectrum.
Yeah, these are nuanced terms for a reason. But there's also the term agnosticism when it deals with ontology, which is the existence of God. So if the proposition is about God existing, it has nothing to do with knowability. What it has to do with, do you accept that God exists or not? Simple as that. And when I made my little flow chart, all Matt said was, oh, Steve didn't start with a proposition. He started with a question. Does God exist? That you shouldn't do that. Nonsense. That's been the great debate question for thousands of years. Does God exist? That's why I started with it. No, everybody I talked to on it that understands these topics academically said, yeah, that's fine with that. What the hell's the problem? I even went into explaining the proposition. right?
It's
Now,
really too bad. It really is too bad because there is discussion here. There is a discussion.
Yes.
There is good discussion that could be had that we're not having. We're not having it with Matt. We're not having it with anybody who listens to Matt because we have to spend so
Every
much
single
time trying to get over this hurdle before you can even get anywhere. And usually they run away. They make a bunch of claims, then piss off.
I have to start from square one every time. And then I keep asking them, "What's your evidence for these claims?" And they get nothing. It's just prescriptively they're saying that I'm wrong, which is ironic, right?
Well, yeah, it's very bizarre because usually they come to you saying, "Well, you're saying I have to use this definition," and you're saying, "Well, no, I'm not. I'm saying that I'm using it this way, and if you do use it that way, you run into these problems." And then they go, "Well, no, I'm using it this way, and that's the way it is." And it's like, what? Why are you saying that I can't use it that way? And how that doesn't actually address the issues of when you do use it that way?
Yeah, and he'll say, "Well, you have to be able to communicate with atheists, and in our groups, this is how we use it." Okay, fine. In my live chat, most of the people use it the way I do. Most of the atheists that I know that have now learned about this stuff tend to use it the way I do because, why? Because I think they realize it makes them better in these discussions. I think it makes them better interlocutors, and I think they have better arguments against theists that way because they say, yeah, what? Wait, one second. It's not, before it was just like they wanted to go, oh, I just don't believe. But now they go, hey, crap, you know what? I really believe there are no gods. Let me explain to you why. And I think this makes for stronger, more interesting argumentation. Do you not?
People, yeah, no, it does. Yeah. People are saying I'm coming out pretty loud, so I'm just going to turn myself down, and hopefully that'll help.
I don't see you peaking.
Yeah, but they're saying I'm louder than you are, comparatively.
Okay.
So I'm just bringing myself down a little bit, and hopefully that'll help.
All right. So real quick, I'll show you this real quick. So Letty had pointed this.
Oh, there's a super chat you should touch. You should read that super chat. It's directly for you.
All right, let me read that real quick. So, hey, my buddy Arnie. Hey, it's been a long time, buddy. Hope you're doing okay. Be safe. For 100 knock, which is the Norwegian krones, isn't it? Someone in the chat the other day said, quote, "The real question is why Steve's still agnostic to the proposition." I thought that was pertinent, and I think that's a great question, by the way. Bert Poole had the exact same question years ago. He said, hey, look, Bert Poole is a smart dude, if you guys know who he is. He's the head of Pixar's graphics design. I mean, he knows his stuff. He actually said, hey, look, stop telling Steve he's wrong. Stop going after Steve for explaining philosophy pretty damn well. I even said, like my logic, he even said, stop telling him you're wrong about the logic because Steve's not, and you guys are having scope issues. And he told a bunch of people, look, you guys have these videos against Steve on logic, and your logic is wrong. Matt Malpass told him their logic is wrong. But he said, go after Steve about his justificatory positions about why he remains agnostic. Dr. Malik says the same thing. In his paper, Defining Atheism and the Burden of Proof, he says, if you wish to remain agnostic, you should have a burden of proof as to why. And I agree with Dr. Malik on that. I've spoken to Dr. Malik about this very thing for quite a while in email. And he loved...
Yeah, no, absolutely.
He loved what I wrote on my blog about a second-order justification for that anybody that has a position, whether it's strong or weak, which would be agnosticism, which is, basically weak atheism, why you have that requires a burden of proof. He thought it was well written, and he agreed with it. And he thought there was some discussion to be had on that. We had great correspondence, right? So that is a really great question, Arnie. I'm not going to get into it right now, but yes, that is a great question.
Yeah, no, and I'm really glad you actually brought that up because that's exactly the kind of discussion I'm talking about. These are the discussions that could be had that would be interesting discussions. This is where, and it would help Matt's position and the people who believe Matt and who follow, if he's trying to, and I want to say follow Matt specifically, and I mean that in a political sense, because that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to create a following to push progressive political views, which is fine. That's a non-issue. But if these were the discussions he was having, he would, one, look like less of an asshole, two, have a lot of less detraction from doing stuff like that, and three, he would alienate less people. He's alienating people for no reason instead of having discussions that could be very good and very productive. And he's not just stopping himself from having that discussion. He's stopping other people from having that discussion.
Absolutely. Stonewalling. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. But so let me ask you this. If I agree that agnostic should have a burden of proof, and that's logically very similar, if not essentially the same as weak atheism, that should have a burden of proof too. Merely saying you don't believe requires a burden of proof. Matt says I'm wrong on that. He has gone on TV, different YouTube channels and shows saying, look, Steve's wrong about that. Okay, great. Explain to me epistemologically why. Because Dr. Carrier agrees with that. Dr. Malik agrees with that. I think Dr. Malpass agrees with that. I mean, I'm not going to speak for him, but I'm pretty sure they probably would. But I think we've talked about that before. But pretty much normatively, that would be the case, right? I mean, I could back that up. Dr. Martin, who actually was for negative atheism, he's even said in one of his writings that not believing still has some kind of burden, right?
And Jay West makes a good point. I don't believe your claim will never be a convincing argument for the negation of theism.
I've said the same thing too. I've said the exact same thing, exactly. But,
yeah, no, and that makes sense. Well, that's not even an argument. But it's not an argument at all. It's just saying, oh, well, I don't believe you. Oh, okay, so what? Why don't you believe me? Right. What have I said that's negate? And there's plenty. There's lots of things you can actually have this discussion over and say, well, I don't believe in your God, and I don't believe that your God actually did this thing. Okay, well, why don't you believe that your God did this thing? Oh, well, easily. Let me show you. It's because it's inconsistent.
Let me ask you, because I think you're exactly right. But let me ask you this. If Matt Dillahunty says that, hey, Steve, you're wrong about a burden of proof. Okay. And I say I'm right. And he says, well, evidence, right? I can quote Martin. I can quote all these other people. And he just says, oh, that's this argument through authority. What do you want for evidence then? You have nothing to quote.
Yeah,
you have nobody in the philosophical community that I've ever talked to that disagrees with me on this. Even Richard Carrier, who's not a big fan of mine, although we talk every so often. We had a discussion the other day. He even agreed with me on this. He just thinks the burden
the problem with that I would actually go another direction in that argument, and I would go the direction of saying, well, great, then your position is no better than mine if that counts as this. Opinion. Why would I change my position?
Yeah, right.
Right. Now, why would I put in effort to change my position if you're not going to put anything forward? So you've put something forward. He's saying that it's a fallacy, and you're like, I don't think it's a fallacy, but let's accept that it is a fallacy. So if it is a fallacy, you need to now present to me why I should change my opinion or my belief system or my epistemology in this. Can you present that? And yes. So the problem is that one, I don't think he can, and two, if he cites anything, that also counts as a fallacy in that case, in which case both positions are equal in their not mattering.
Yeah, and by the way,
neither matter.
Citing experts, this is weird, because since when is citing experts a fallacy? Right. I mean, you ask for it in science, say, if creationist says this, and you say, well, can you cite me something scientifically of that? Philosophy is no different. There are certain norms. Apparently I'm still too loud. Yeah, I've turned you down. I corrected that, or I've adjusted it, so we'll see if that fixes the problem.
Okay.
But yeah, citing experts is not a fallacy, okay? It is called argumentum ad verecundium, which is perfectly legit if it's an actual authority that has weighed into this, that you're citing to support your arguments. I have never once said it is true because authorities say so. That would be a fallacy. And Matt Dillahunty blocked me on Facebook, misunderstanding what I wrote. He was thinking I was slamming on people that worked at Walmart or gas stations or whatever in my Facebook post, which was I specifically said I was not doing, but he strawmanned me anyways and then lied about it. Because what I said was, look, if we're going to hold the people to the same standards, right? Do you guys remember back in the day when we were talking about DNA and genetics and evolution? We had Rocket Ronnie, and we had Tommy Hall and all these people, right? And we're like, hey, look, your guys are saying this, but all these experts, every one of them is disagreeing with you. Who is more likely the case if I'm going to say who am I better off listening to? Same thing with people in the medical profession. Am I going to listen to the 99 doctors that say, hey, this treatment? You're going to listen to this one guy off the YouTube that says, no, you don't need it. Why is there a different double standard to be had here? I don't get it. And so I said,
well, it's like, okay,
let me just wrap it up real quick. So I said, here's the people that agree with me. I have all these people agree, these academics, and yet I have these 5 people that, and I said, well, because I knew that one worked for Sears and one worked for Gardner. I wasn't even being hyperbolic. I'm like, hey, look, I'm not degrading where they work, but who, as you think, should I listen to when we use the same arguments against Tommy Hall, who was a gardener? I said, should I listen? People are like, should we listen to a gardener, or should we listen with people that have PhD in genetics? What's the difference? I wasn't trying to slight being a gardener. I think that's a great profession. But you're not an expert in the field, was my point by the post. And I explicitly said this. And Matt lied about it. He outright lied and said I was demeaning people of those professions. Bullshit. Go read it. It's still on my Facebook
and Matt
page.
Matt also makes that argument all the time when it comes to theists. So even if you were if he's making the same argument, by that he's by his own argument. If that's what he says you were doing, he does it all the time. So that's ridiculous anyway. Blunt solder. I'm putting a T in, and I apologize. I agree. I don't believe you is just an argument from incredulity, which is called out by flirts all the time. But how somehow these guys get away with it? Yes. Yep. So if a flat earther says, "Well, gravity's not real," or I don't believe in gravity, it's the same as saying, "Well, I don't believe in a God." Well, okay. Well, why don't you? Or, well, let me show you that, like, let me make this argument. Now with a flurf, it's a lot more like, I can show you super hard science.
Yeah.
You have a L in there. Don't gaslight me. Just kidding.
I got a Streamlabs thing. I haven't checked my Streamlabs, and I will in a second, because I don't know why it doesn't come up. It's supposed to come up, but it didn't, so I will try to fix that. I thought I had a widget for that, but maybe I didn't put it in. But I'll get to that in a second.
You can't do that. Yeah, and you can't do that with philosophy and these kinds of arguments in theology. You can't use hard evidence like mathematics the same way in this sense, which I agree. You can't do that. You can say, like, hey, let me show you the equation for gravity. I can't show you the equation for atheism. That's not how that works. So it's a lot easier to call out one than the other. However, it is still the same thing. You can't, I just don't believe you.
Yeah, it's just
it's
worthless.
Gravity is real.
All right, so Mr. Present 99 donated $5 through Streamlabs. I haven't used that in ages, so I mean,
that one didn't even show up in the live chat.
Yeah, it didn't.
That's weird.
I'll look into that, because I got to fix that, because I do want to start using my Streamlabs again. So he says, question: if God or anything that fits the term doesn't exist, why the hell is he, she, it playing this guessing game? It makes no sense, in my opinion, that there is nothing like this, and life is simply for living, and you have only one chance. Which, by the way, is a position that you can have, right? But I mean, the whole question for the great debate question, Mr. President, is there some type of God? This has been thousands of years. People have asked this question, right? Now, people have argued one way or another. I don't sit there and I really don't argue God exists or God does not exist, because I'm agnostic on it, right? That's not my thing. I don't have a dog in that fight. Matt Dillahunty argues that God does not exist, although he falls back all the time on, I merely don't believe. Well, bullshit. He does believe there are no gods. He argues as if there are no gods. Right? I can understand on the show he wants theists to call in and basically
and try to convince you. That's
right. Fine. Okay, fine. Yeah. I got no problem with that. But off the show, bullshit. He has just as much as burden as anybody else. He doesn't get a free pass, right? And so, why is God playing these games? How would I know? I don't know any properties of God, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's the whole problem of evil and the whole divine hiddeness problem. Why he does?
Yeah, but then separate the show out. You present it as in, this is what the show is, this is how we're doing it, and nobody has a problem with that. Nobody has a problem with that. No. That is a non-issue. You want to have a show that's run this way, that is totally okay. It's great. Have a show that runs that way. It's a good show. There's no problem with that. But don't go on to separate live streams. Don't go on to other platforms. Don't go and try and run when somebody brings up Steve's argument that, well, Steve's just a prescriptivist asshole.
He's a mean poopy head.
And by
the way, I never called Matt Dillahunty stupid. He in his live feed the other day on Twitch, he was like, said for something that I think I called him stupid. When the hell did I do this? I think he's a very smart guy. I just think that
his argument is stupid.
I think it's pathetic. I think that him strawmanning me and lying about me is pathetic. But real quick, let me read what I got here, then we'll get back to the live chat. So the reason I pointed this out with Leody was he actually asked Matt Dillahunty, which is probably going to get you blocked, by the way. But but he says, Matt Dillahunty, why do you call Steve McRae a prescriptivist? You should be open to hearing the difference between the two of you. Open to hear the difference between the two of you, which would honestly be great, seeing as you've mischaracterized him and strawman his position for at least 2 years. Other people are recognizing this, right? I'm not the only one to saying, dude, you misrepresented me. Knock it the fuck off.
That's why we have to address this more than once. Because if we only address it once, Matt will keep doing this.
Yes.
But if we address it every time, people start to notice and realize that this is a continual thing that's going on. So Daily Shadow says, Steve, I'm not sure what you're asking for. If someone says that they don't know one way about a position, what is it that they have to provide you as evidence for that? Like, do they have to?
Okay, so that's a good question. I actually have a blog on this, so again, go check out my blog. You can find in the video description on what it means to say I don't know. I don't know generally refers to what's called ordinary epistemic doubt, but it's some amphibity there. And what I mean by amphibity is it has multiple different understandings, or possible. There's some ambiguity there linguistically, because I don't know could actually say that you're not making any knowledge claims as well, right? So if I say I don't know that P, that could say that I don't have the knowledge dispositions toward P. But that's generally not how we understand that in general common parlance, right? When we say I don't know, you're saying you don't know how to answer the question. So if I say, Chesh, does God exist? What is your answer?
No.
Okay, well that's a hard. I think most people would say that's a hard or strong.
It's a very straightforward answer.
Right, straightforward. Done. Boom. Okay, no, okay, we're done. Yeah, she's an atheist, right? In all contexts, in any possible way most people define atheism, she would be considered an atheist. Although I did ask this question to somebody the other day. This is funny. I know it's a tangent, and I apologize, but it's important. I asked the person, look, well, what do you call a person who believes that there are no gods? And they refused to answer. They're like, that's a complex question fallacy. I'm like, no, the fuck it isn't. It's a very simple question. There's no complexity to be had there. I've never met anybody that thinks that's hard of a question. Cheshire answered no. So what do you call somebody who believes there are no gods? Clearly, I guess that would be an atheist, right? There's no complex question fallacy to be had there. And I couldn't.
Well, not if you use the ACA's definition. I might be considered an agnostic.
Well, I mean, even in the ACA definition,
see why this gets confusing.
If you believe there are no gods, that clearly entails you do not believe. So even by that definition, you're an atheist. And they didn't understand this. And I was like, look, you're just a dishonest interlocutor. I'm done. I finally didn't end up blocking them because I'm just going to be blocking anybody. I'm going to give like 3 chances to answer simple questions. If they can't, you're done. And somebody says, well, when did you start beating your wife? I'm like, first of all, that's a complex question fallacy. That's not a simple question, but it's still answerable. And I explained it to them. But I even said specifically, if you continue to not answer simple questions, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. But anyways, so back to what the question at hand. Which I kind of forgot what it was at this point, but and what was refresh my memory, Chesh, your pocket brain. Read back what he asked.
Goldfish, I'm not sure what you're asking for. If
okay.
someone says they don't know one way about a position, what is it that they have to provide you as evidence for that? Like, do they have
so
to?
So if she would, let's say she's agnostic on the proposition, right? She would answer, I don't know, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's not. That in that frame, right, as we understand, even though there's the locution is I don't know, but the illocution is she's expressing that she doesn't know how to properly answer the question. She's suspending judgment on it. She's not saying that it's yes or no or true or false. She's saying I don't have a position on it either way. That's what we mean by these things, right? Same thing in a multiple choice question. If you say if it's a multiple choice question, one second, if you're taking a test and it says, is this, a question that says yes, no, I don't know. It's not asking you if you have a knowledge claim about it, right? It's asking you, do you know how to answer the question? Can you answer the question? You're like, no, I can't answer the question. If somebody says, Steve, does God exist? I say, I don't know. I don't think it's yes or no. But a hard atheist would say yes, and a theist would say no, and a theist would say yes. Simple as that. So what you're asking for is, when you say I don't know, say, okay, what is it that you are why do you think you need to suspend judgment? Why do you think that the theist arguments are not that convincing? Do you think the atheist arguments are not that convincing? Why is it that you hold to the agnostic position that you cannot make a decision on the question? I think that's a fair question to ask somebody if they're agnostic or they don't know, right? It's a fair question to ask me, which is, like I said, I have talked about that before. I've answered that question. I'm not going to do it in here because it's long and involved, but do you see the point what I'm making here?
Another time.
But you see the point I'm making? You just ask the person, okay, you don't know, but what would, let's talk about what would convince you. Let's talk about some of the theist arguments versus the atheist arguments, right? Because, by the way, if atheism is merely a lack of belief for somebody who doesn't believe in God, why are there atheist arguments? Like divine hiddenness or logical problem of evil, evidential problem of evil. These are arguments for the non-existence of God. Right? I mean, you don't have arguments for merely not believing. You have arguments for the positive.
Yeah,
case.
well, it turns into like anytime like Fight the Flat Earth is arguing with a flat earther, almost all of the time they do not come with their own evidences or their own thing to prove. They just poke holes and they try to question what has already been presented in the globe Earth model, right? So they're going to be like, oh well, why don't planes have to point their nose down, or why does this happen, or why isn't that happening? But they don't actually bring anything to present themselves. And Matt Dillahunty's doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
He's not bringing anything to present himself. He is just poking holes in theist arguments. Now, in some ways, that's fine, particularly on the atheist experience, because that's what the show is about. That's totally okay for him to do. However, when you start getting into discussions with people like Steve, or with people who are philosophers, or with people who are a little bit outside of the atheist experience, you can't just brush off their arguments or what they're saying as if they're just pedantic, or you're going to straw man them. If you don't accept people straw manning you, why should anybody be okay with you straw manning them?
Can you read the genetic reploids comment? Because that's just bizarre.
There are no atheist arguments. There are arguments poking holes in theist arguments. Well, that's what I just said. There like on the atheist experience specifically, that is literally what they do. That is literally but when you get into a debate or you get into a discussion, you don't get to do that. You have to bring your own fucking argument.
Are you really going to sit there and say, not you, but generic reploid, that logical problem of evil isn't an argument against the non-existence of that type of omni-god? That literally is an atheist argument saying that God does not exist, right?
Yep, no, and
the evidential argument is against a benevolent God, and there are divine hiddenness, and then you make the argument, look, you take an aggregate of all these things, the probability is more likely the case that there are no gods. That is an atheist argument.
Yep.
I mean, to think
Steely
otherwise
Moon for $1.99 sent a little microphone.
Thank you, IE Moon. Is that a mic drop? Is that what that is? Or just a microphone?
I don't know, maybe. Cool.
But this is the point.
If
if you tell somebody, and think about this rationally, if I go to a theist and I say, look, this guy, generic reploid, says there's no atheist arguments, then it entails there's no good atheist arguments, because there's no bad atheist arguments either. There's no arguments to be had. The theist says, okay, then what the hell's the point? Have a nice day.
Right.
Yeah. What are you arguing then?
What are we even talking about?
What are we even talking about here? Theist says, you haven't convinced me of anything. Saying that you don't believe there's no atheist argument doesn't convince anybody of anything.
And that's why I was saying that if Matt Dillahunty wants to run that, oh, well, you're using an appeal to authority, well, okay, let's just run with that. Let's say we accept that. Now you present your side, and then without doing what I just did, without citing any sources, and then that's immediate. So why would I change my position? All you've done is make both arguments equal, which is not convincing. That's not going to convince anybody to change their position. And then you would have to also then go through Matt Dillahunty's history and what they've said on their show and done on their show whenever they're talking about biology, and apply the same thing. You can't appeal to Aaron, and you can't appeal to Cy Gart can't appeal to the fact that he's a biologist and knows the subject. That kind of just defeats the purpose of studying anything ever at all. Anytime.
Simius, he says, do I have to start from the beginning now? Or C. McCrae, could you give me a recap? I'm going to send that to you on Twitter, my friend. Just wait for it. It'll be anytime. Just sit there and wait for that recap. I'll explain it all to you. He's my favorite Twitter troll, by the way. But anyways, the generic reploid. Can you just read the first?
Ilya said that was a mic drop.
Thank you, Elliot. So generic. Can you read the generic reploids? Just the top question.
What do you guys want atheists to claim to prove atheism?
Whoever said anything,
I wonder. Thanks for reading my comment, but atheism for me is just the counter reaction of theism gone too far. Sorry if that's complicated. That's not complicated. It's more of that's more of an anti-theist position.
But whoever says
you're religion is a problem, therefore.
Whoever said we have to, I've never said you have to prove a damn thing. I've never made this argument. You only have to prove something if you claim you can prove it. I can prove 0.999 repeating equals 1. I can do it in algebra. I can do it in calculus. I can do it in geometric progressions. I can literally prove it in mathematics So if I make the claim, I can prove 0.99 repeating equals 1, then you could say, well, okay, demonstrate it. And if I don't, you say, well, I don't accept the claim. Okay, fine. But I can prove that. I can actually show you. But I've never said atheist or theist have to prove shit. The only thing they have to do is, if they say, if a theist says, look, I can prove God, then you say, okay, sit back and go for it. I got no problem with that. If an atheist says, I can prove God doesn't exist, okay, go for it. But you can't hold them to that unless they make that claim.
We've gotten back into the difference between a knowledge and a belief. If you say that this is the way it is, I can prove it, then yeah, especially if you're going to enter a discussion. When you enter a discussion with somebody, then there's a social contract, like an unspoken social contract there that you're going to demonstrate your point.
Can you read blood slobbers again? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I used to say, I don't have beliefs, I know it, until I heard these talks from
And that to me is one of the greatest things I can hear, because that means that we have actually informed somebody of somebody and they've listened and they've taken it to heart. Because when a theist hears somebody say, look, I don't have any beliefs, they're going to go, hey, this dude is like way the frick out there. And if somebody says, look, I don't believe that it's true, I know it's true, it's even worse, right? Because knowledge is a subset of belief, canonically speaking, with justified true belief, which is pretty standard. I mean, you don't have to hold by it. There's other ones. But basically, most theists are going to have that as their reference for the most part. So when an atheist says, look, I don't have any beliefs, and I say, okay, well, that means you don't believe that I exist. And they go like, well, yeah, I don't believe that you exist. I'm like, does that sound rational to you? I mean, if you tell a theist that you don't believe that they exist, that sounds a little irrational to me. Actually, it sounds a lot of irrational. And I even wrote, again, a blog entry on that called the problem with not believing. And what I meant was, if you tell me that you don't believe that I exist, I really don't know if I'm talking to a rational person or not, right?
Well, see, if you've noticed at this point, we're starting to move on from just shutting down the conversation. But how long did it take us to get here? If you've noticed, we've started to move into like what arguments are good, what arguments are bad, why are those arguments good, why is it reasonable to use this definition in some circumstances, why is it not reasonable in other circumstances, social constructs and like goals, and like there's a discussion to be had here. But it took us an hour to get past the blocks that are getting put in the way for no discernible reason.
Absolutely. And yes, I did. I'm checking my Streamlab right now, Mr. President. So Mr. President has asked through Streamlabs, he says, God is an idea of mankind to explain the unexplainable in that time and to control the masses. It's a shame that this works these days and people are willing to fight over it. Even the non-believers fight among themselves. Pathetic, in my humble opinion. Now, again, this is an argument to be had, right? That is something that he would say, okay, this is what I believe. Let's talk about somebody who believes otherwise. Let's mutually have a conversation, have a dialectical synthesis where we come together to find what the truth of the matter is. Everybody has fun. Everybody learns something, right? Now, I think Mr. President probably has some value of that particular statement. I think that in some cases, like lightning, they say, we don't understand this. Must be some God that does it. Okay, I want to hear a theist argue against that. From the position that's not the case. Not merely, I don't believe you. I want a theist to say, especially a polytheist, hey, Ocean, say, hey, look it, lightning strikes. Yeah, that's Thor. Okay, so now you have Mr. President against with Ocean, Keltoy. Mr. President says God is just some idea of mankind to explain the unexplainable, like lightning back then. And Ocean says, no, really, Thor does exist, and he is doing this, although I'm sure Ocean accepts the science as well. That would be a really interesting conversation, would it not? Right?
Well, yeah, like I said, there's conversations that can be had here, but not when you get stonewalled. Not when you get stonewalled by people misrepresenting, strawmanning, and as well as just ignoring or brushing aside your argument. Because it'd be one thing if Matt Dillahunty just ignored this, that's one thing. If he just ignored it and was like, whatever,
right. I only bring him up because he actively lied about me
fine.
yesterday. That's the only reason. I don't use his name for views because I get the same amount of views regardless. He actively lied about me. I mean, come on.
And and on the other hand, none of us are saying that he has to have this discussion.
No,
he doesn't have to, but he keeps bringing it up wrong.
I've never said I want to have a discussion with Matt. People have actually emailed both of us.
You've actively said you don't
want to. Yeah, people have emailed and said, hey, Steve, will you have a discussion with Matt? I said no. And then Matt said no. We're like, okay, great. That's not the point, right? I mean, I'm not interested in having a discussion with the man because he doesn't get my positions correct to begin with. And by the way, Mr. President, when you say that something like all gods are human invention, you're taking the strong atheist argument, right? You're literally giving an atheist argument that's a generic repload said that there isn't any. He just said there are no atheist arguments. Well, Mr. President just gave you one. Gods are a man-made invention is an atheist argument that there are no gods, right? I mean,
Helios5755 says, Steve, what would the position of claiming to know what gods are unknowable? So is it irrational to hold either belief or disbelief? In some ways, I would say yes. That is probably the strongest agnostic argument that I've heard. You can't know what you don't know. You don't know.
So let me kind of parse this, and I'm going to try to give it the...
existence.
Yeah, I'm going to give it
Sorry, there's a correction.
Yeah, I'm going to give it the best possible interpretation. So the position that claiming to know that gods are unknowable is the hard agnostic position, right? The hard agnostic says, look, gods are unknowable. We can't know one way or another, right? But that doesn't make it irrational to hold a belief either way, right? Just because I think just because something is not knowable is no relevancy really of whether we believe it or not, right? I don't think like right now, even though there's a possibility we can know if aliens exist, right? Clearly that is an ontological possibility. But right now it is not the case. But it doesn't make somebody irrational to hold the belief that aliens exist, does it? No, they base it on other things, like the Drake equation. There could be some, like for example, even properly basic beliefs, right?
That equation is actually the works for both sides. Sure, yeah. It works for a reason to believe in aliens, and it works for a reason not to believe in aliens.
But a properly basic belief, like the belief that induction will work tomorrow, right? I can't know that to be the case. I cannot know induction will work tomorrow because I can't justify it. But it's not irrational to believe it. It's irrational, right? It's neither rational nor irrational. It's unjustifiable, unwarrantable. But I cannot demonstrate to you that induction will work tomorrow because I have to use induction to do that. That's humans' problem of induction. It's not justifiable.
There's something there.
But I can believe it.
Yeah, there is.
I want to believe it. I believe it irrationally, though.
Yeah, you have to throw in something that is essentially practicality. You have to live your life in a practical manner. So in saying that, well, I don't know for sure that induction is going to work tomorrow, I don't have a choice but to operate as if it's going to, because you have no other option because it's impractical to behave in any other way. It's an ingredient
for rationality. Because if I wake up in the morning and I think to myself, look, the uniformity of nature has changed and the laws of logic and laws of physics and everything is like completely different, and I don't know if there's going to be a floor to put my feet on, how am I going to get out of bed? Right? You have to presume certain things.
Actually, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and defend Mr. President's position, because Robert Payne said, is there any proof to the conspiracy theory that religion was designed to control the masses? When was the meeting? And I'm going to go ahead and defend against Ozzy here, who says, no, there isn't. It's a silly conspiracy theory, given that most religions now and historically have not been organized religions with mechanisms for control. I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of a wrench into that, just like the council that decided the Bible.
You talk about Council of Nicaea, Council of the Apocalyptic Creed, or the Apostolic Creed, the Apostles' Creed,
the Apocrypha, and I'm going to also go ahead and say, absolutely, I can say that religion makes decisions to control masses. If you want another example, I'm going to go ahead and throw at the Catholic Church convincing people not to use condoms in third world countries.
And this is a great argument. See, this is the discussions we like to have on this channel that we should be having, right? But I mean, a little pushback to Ozzy. I think hell was something to design to control the masses.
This is just a fun little pushback. I would have to do a lot more research to actually have a full-on discussion about this. I'm just like pick.
But I think hell, the argumentum ad bacillum, the threat of hell, believe me, or you're going to hell, was something to control people. I do believe that. Now, if Ozzy or anybody else wants to argue against that, that'd be fascinating. I'd love to have that discussion, right?
The invention of something like that, and the amount of pushback the church was given to education and teaching people how to read, I would also say is a conspiracy against people learning how to read, because the Catholic Church could maintain its control. Failed at Engineering for 5 says, if deduction worked yesterday and the day before, probability is that it will work tomorrow, ? Unless new information comes in suggesting otherwise. It's a difference between you believing that it's going to, based on past experiences, and knowing for sure that it will work
But you're not even justified to believe it, though. Because in order to believe it, in order to be justified to believe it, you have to use induction to justify the use of induction, which is circular reasoning, which is a logical fallacy.
No, I don't think I agree with that.
That's Hume's problem with induction.
I've heard a very good. Well, I've heard a very good argument, essentially saying that, well, if reasoning works, and I'm going to use my reasoning to reason that my reasoning works, right? The argument is that, well, that's circular. Yes. Well, if I need to find out if a pen is working, can I use the pen?
Yeah, but that doesn't say that's going to work tomorrow, right? And if you can't use what you're trying to prove or to justify in the proof itself, right? Because if you can have a conclusion from any single premise, that's circular reasoning. So
yeah, but if nothing has happened to that pen between point A and point B, then
you're just
no
presuming
reason.
That. You're assuming that the physics hasn't changed.
I've got the pen the whole time. Well, no. I've got the
pen
the whole time.
Sure, but how do you know that the laws of the universe have not changed when you have the pen, but there's something that has fundamentally changed?
By using the pen.
But that doesn't tell you anything.
It tells me if the pen works.
Okay, so
not.
You hold a pen in your hand. 24 hours from now, can you tell me if that pen won't just magically evaporate or something? If the laws of the universe have not changed, the uniformity of nature has remained constant.
Yeah, and see, this is the reason why people get frustrated with philosophy, because now you're running into the problem of this is not practical. There is no reason for me to think that the pen is not going to work tomorrow. Period.
Oh, I don't mind a practical argument. Look,
I'm arguing.
No, that's a different thing. Practicality is a different thing. I have to practicality think that the pen's going to be there tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's not justification. Justification is when you say that you believe.
The answer is that I have no other choice.
You have no other choice, right? But that's not a justification. Right. That's hey, look, I've got no other choice but to use it that way, which is pragmatic, right? But it's not a justification of why it will continue to hold tomorrow. You know. But yeah, so anyways, these are the actual great discussions to be had, right?
I just imagine it's just self-attesting.
And by the way, Ozzy makes a decent point. He's like, he tells you basically that some religions do exert control, but there are many organized, religions that don't.
Sure, yeah. If you want to switch around, if you want to go something more specific and say that this particular religion does not do this, then sure, you might be able to make that argument. It would depend on what religion you were going to propose and why you would propose that religion, and then I would also have to then go and look at that religion and be like, is that true or is that necessarily the case, and why or why not? Because like if you were to throw out like, I think that Buddhism doesn't control people, and I'm gonna go bullshit Tibet. Yeah. right so like there's a back and forth that can be had there for sure, and there's no reason to suspect that there couldn't be a religion that doesn't look to control people, but I would probably be willing to make the bet that most, especially when you're talking about a religion in particular, that like there might be a belief system, or there might be a position, right? There might be a position of like, oh, we just meditate that isn't designed. It's like, no, you do whatever you want. Like probably maybe Taoism, where it's just like nothing. The answer to Taoism is the answer to what's Taoism?
Nothing.
Not even nothing. It's just
and
no
by the way,
answer.
Ozzy's been around for a long while and can tell you, I've never been a prescriptivist. I've never argued you must use these terms a very specific way. That's what a prescriptivist would be. I've been a descriptivist for as long as I can remember, because I think words have usages and with no internal intrinsic meaning to them. I think we give them, instantiate them with some kind of meaning, and they're just signifiers that represent something. That's how I look at words. That's not a prescriptivist approach, that you must use it these ways. I don't say that, but we had a super chat.
Yeah, we got two. Failed at Engineering for 5 says, unless new information comes in or circumstances change, I'm saying we have to stay on track because we don't have anything else to go on. Well, that's a properly basic belief. Yeah, it's a matter of, it's when you jump, and this is kind of what I was trying to demonstrate. There's the difference between when you jump from just speaking philosophy and when you start trying to apply it. So like when you can't apply that, it would be a reasonable way to live your life to suspend judgment on whether or not induction is going to work tomorrow. It's just not practical. Well, this is why people get frustrated and think philosophy
I agree wholeheartedly with Ozzy on this. I think that what to say that you have no choice to believe in induction is not a justification. But read what he said, because these exactly. Sure. Right.
It's just not. Yeah, exactly. And Ilya Moon for 2 says, "Can we just argue that bacon is God?"
Yes.
We could probably.
I'm okay with that. I'll become a theist if bacon's
on
God.
the other hand. Yeah. On the other hand, you start running into more interesting conversations once you get past the goddamn
Right.
wall.
We always go back to step one because I get these clips people send me, and it's like, oh my god, Matt lied about me again. He's keep telling people I'm prescriptivist when I'm not. He keeps getting my positions wrong, which he never got right again. It's either A, shut the fuck up about me, or B, get the shit right. Take your pick, right? But to sit there and get things wrong for 2 fucking years when people have told him that's not Steve's position, stop saying it to people. It's a little annoying. But Reberlazzi said, because he said saying we have no choice but to believe in induction is not a defense of induction. I use induction doesn't justify the belief that most have that induction is rational, and that's true. Again, I don't think you can rationalize the use of induction, right? I mean, there are newer papers out there I've tried to read, but they're very difficult, and I can't understand them, that try to resolve Hume's problem of induction. But the basic gist of it is you can't.
I'd be willing to grant that you may run into the problem in the future. I might not be able to predict if you're going to start throwing out that the laws of the universe could change tomorrow. Well, if the laws of the universe could change tomorrow, you can't say one way or the other about pretty much anything at that point, which to me is not reasonable.
Right.
It might logically follow in philosophy, but it's not reasonable because
you're trying to pragmatic
stepped out of the rules of practicality. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying that it's not reasonable in philosophy. I'm saying it's not reasonable to apply that practically. On the other hand, I can use induction to prove induction, and I just did by using the pen.
No, that's not. That's literally circular reasoning. Like.
No, I disagree.
Well, okay.
I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to disagree on that.
Yeah, well, we'll table that for another time.
I can use the pen, and that will tell me whether or not the pen works. That is not circular.
Totally
but if you're going to say that it is, if you're going to say that it is,
because you're using induction to justify induction. You're looking at the pen, going, "Hey, I'm using induction to say that it's going to hold tomorrow," which is clearly circular to me.
No, I'm not saying tomorrow.
Or
no,
5 seconds
stop.
from now.
I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm saying currently. I can use the pen right now to say that this pen
right
is
now
working,
it might change.
Period.
You don't know.
Well, oh my God, Steve, Steve, you're strawmanning me.
But you're basing that upon prior observations, are you not? Or current observations?
No, I'm basing it on currently using the pen.
Still observing the pen. You're still observing induction. You're still.
Yes. I am using the pen, and that will tell me whether or not the pen is currently working.
Is prior observations.
I'm not saying that it will work tomorrow. I'm saying that the pen is currently working. Now, again, if you want to go into and say, well, if you put the pen down and pick it up again, you can't guarantee that pen is going to work if the laws of the universe change on a dime, which we know they don't.
No, we don't know that. As a matter of fact, I thoroughly disagree with that. I'm agnostic on that. I have no way to determine. Hang on, let me finish. I don't have any way to determine if the uniformity of nature is going to hold or not. It's not reasonable to assume that it will, and it's not reasonable to assume that it won't. I am agnostic on that proposition. Again, agnostic on the proposition.
And this is why
because that is the irrational, properly basic belief approach to like a foundationalist approach.
Right, but if you recall, what I had said previously is that I had said from a practical standpoint, and then you were completely ignoring that I've already said the practicality.
But that doesn't justify anything. Practicality doesn't justify.
I didn't say it did. I did not say that it did.
Okay, so because if you're arguing we have to use, if you're merely arguing it from practicality that we have to use it to function, there's nobody going to argue against that. We use it to function.
I'm saying that I can use the pen to decide, to justify whether or not that pen is working. By using the pen and it working, that to me justifies that pen is working. However, practically, yes, I can say that I would say that pen will work tomorrow.
Yeah, but how do you know it's going to work tomorrow? That's the whole point.
If you're going to add in, can I through philosophy say, because that's from a practical point of view, from philosophy, can I say that pen will work tomorrow if the laws of the universe are liable to change? Then no, because as soon as you throw in if the laws of the universe could change tomorrow, that's completely unreasonable from a practical. Let me finish, you fuck! I swear to God, I will leave this call. You're doing what Matt Dillahunty does to you. From a practical position, from the position of we have to operate in a specific way. That's the position. The position is that if it's practical, or if it's unpractical. Like I said, you can make these arguments from a philosophical standpoint and go in circles about this for fucking ever, because you've thrown in that you've added that the laws of the universe can change tomorrow.
And I completely disagree with everything you just said.
There's
It's. I don't think you're fundamentally understanding the objection we have that Hume was giving, because there's no reason. Look, there's no, and we'll move on to a different topic, but in a nutshell, there's no justification for accepting that the uniformity of nature holds, and there's no justification to accept that uniformity of nature doesn't hold. There's no way to justify either way. You just can't. So when you say, will this be the uniformity of nature hold tomorrow? We can't say. There's no reason to say one way or another.
Yeah. You have to behave in a way, and from a practical point of view, you have to behave in a way as if it's going to, because we don't have any other choice.
Well,
it's unreasonable to act any other way.
I mean, if you say, hey, look, I even said, look, I have to make certain assumptions. These are what's literally presuppositions, right? These are presuppositions that the uniformity of nature holds, or a properly basic belief that they will hold, or a faith-based commitment. I call them faith-based commitments as well. That we have to make a presupposition that uniformity of nature holds, but that's unwarranted and it's unjustifiable. It's held irrationally to me. That's how I view it. But anyways, we got way in the weeds, man. But those are the good discussions to be had. Go ahead.
Yeah, failed engineering says, if I write with a pen and it's working, then question mark. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I do want to specify, this is the problem people have with philosophy and trying to have these conversations with people who study philosophy more. Philosophy removes the practicality a lot of the time from a situation. They're talking about, can you justify induction on its own? No, you can't. Because you can't possibly know tomorrow that the earth isn't going to be flat. You can't possibly have that knowledge because you can't see the future. So as soon as you throw that in, the reason why philosophy sounds unreasonable and why people have difficulty with it and why it seems like a lot of mental masturbation to people is because that practicality is removed. So when you try to have these conversations with someone on fucking Twitter about this shit,
difficult.
You're gonna have a bad
day. Everybody has a bad day.
I'm not trying to actually run this argument. I'm trying to explain to you why people have a problem. Helios575 for 10 says, Steve, you do realize this current discussion between you and Cheshire is exactly why there is an increasing number of scientists that view philosophy as being diminishingly useful in modern day.
I don't think that's necessarily the case, actually, Helios, because I think a lot of actual scientists value the necessity of having philosophy incorporated with science. I mean, science is predicated on philosophical foundations, right? I mean, clearly, methodological naturalism is a scientific something that they held to, which is a philosophical position, right? I mean, it is grounded in that whole philosophical position that, look, we want to have an observation of a natural event, and we want to explain it using natural explanations, right? We don't want to have supernatural explanations in science. It excludes all that by fiat, which in this case I think is right. By fiat, it excludes it and then puts it under scientific methodology. But there are people out there that think that it shouldn't. There are people out there that say, look, we should maybe in science incorporate the ability to have maybe supernatural causation. I disagree with that. There are also people out there that should we have not just methodological naturalism, but outright ontological or metaphysical naturalism in science. I don't think that necessarily should be the case, right? I mean, because at that point they're saying, look, there is no, there's only thing but the natural, and there's no thing beyond that. There's only thing about materialism. There's nothing beyond that. And I think that science can't really explain that on its own. I think that's a philosophical concept, not a scientific concept.
So I actually do think that Helios has a point. Helios has the point in that he's not talking about whether or not it's philosophy is actually useful or not. He's talking about whether or not why people might think that philosophy no longer has a place in modern science. He's not saying whether or not he agrees with that position. He's saying that this is the feeling that seems to be happening, and why you're getting this split that Landon was talking about the other day. Landon was talking about there's a split in philosophy, and there shouldn't be. You should have some philosophy in your science, and you should have some science in your philosophy. But because because of things like you can't practically operate as if an induction doesn't work, then you run into this problem like, well, then how are we ever supposed to do any experiments about anything ever and learn anything, right? We have to make that assumption.
Which it is, an assumption, yeah.
Which is fine, yeah, I agree that it's an assumption. So it's a matter of like, however, if you're going to have this discussion and you're going to discuss these hardline issues as philosophers, you're turning off the scientific community from philosophy, right? I think that's what he's trying to get across.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, like, model-dependent realism, scientific instrumentalism, scientific realism, scientific anti-realism. These are all philosophical concepts, and scientists use these to determine various models, right? But Mr. President 99 says, look at the chat, Cheshire, how they defend a book that is written by humans by hearsay of some guys that lived decades after it all happened. Fascinating. And again, that is an atheist argument to be had, right? So when whoever was earlier that said, hey, look, there's no atheist arguments, there clearly are. And that is a strong atheist approach, which is, again, how I use the word atheist in the positive case, right? That's how I normally use it. But by the way, let's go back full circle to where we started. When you get Matt Dillahunty, for some reason, prescriptively seeming to tell me that I can't use it that way. I don't know why,
Yeah, it's bizarre. I think there's if you're entering into a conversation with a theist, and you're taking the position that you don't believe them, then no matter if you are also a theist, you can also be a theist. You can be a theist arguing against a theist about which God is going to be correct. But the first thing you need to do is find out, what do they mean when they say God? What are you talking about? Which God are you speaking of? And that sounds dismissive, but it's really not. It's not. It's a very relevant question, because I'm going to argue against the existence of any particular God differently if you're telling me about your religion versus if you're going to tell me about something that is like when people describe God as love. Well, okay then, yeah, I think love is a chemical reaction in the brain that exists. Cool, we both believe in a God.
It's kind of a naturalistic fallacy, isn't it, though? Describing God as good or some kind of natural properties like love, that to me would be a naturalistic fallacy.
Well, yeah, then it's not. Yeah, God implies that there is, or by definition, should have like some kind of supernatural quality to it. However, you run into a lot of. If you do run into that argument, you need to define the God, because there are people who think that, and they're not necessarily committing the fallacy on purpose. That is actually what they believe, and they might not even mean a supernatural God by that. Or they might think love is supernatural, and that's a different discussion.
When people talk to me about naturalistic gods, the first question I ask them is, okay, if I have a pencil that's a pencil and a pencil that's a god, what is the limiting factor between them? What is the differentiation to be had that one pencil is a divine origin, the other one's not? How do I recognize the distinction to be made between them? Never got an answer for that. And who runs that fallacy is, well, I wouldn't call it fallacy, but G-Man runs that all the time about naturalistic gods. If you accept a pencil as a god, you're a theist. Well, I don't use the terms that way, because to me a naturalistic god is no different than just a pencil. I don't see the distinction to be had there, right?
Well, yeah, in that case, it's the same thing as if that is the same thing that applies to Matt. If you're going to apply that in that case, then you have to explain to me why your God is better than the pencil. And
my pencil is better than yours.
Why your God is better than the pencil God, then we're stuck. And why should I change my position?
My pen is more a better God than your pencil. Hallelujah.
Yeah, exactly. My
praise
pen God
number
is better than
2.
your pencil God. I would actually be on the side of the pencil. I think pencils are better than pens.
Yeah, praise number 2.
They work more consistently.
There you go. Hashtag praise number 2. People have no idea what the hell that means, but we'll go with that. Praise number 2.
No matter what happens to the universe, a pencil will always work. Prove me wrong.
Some possible world.
Change my mind.
So anyways, let's kind of wrap this up. We got some last minute questions coming in the live chat, by all means. But I think, people, again, I don't expect Matt to ever watch this. I don't do this for Matt. Fuck that. I don't care if he watches me or not. He for 2 years hasn't bothered to have the respect, to say, hey, look, maybe Steve has onto something here, because a lot of people, agree with me. A lot of people listen to my shit for a reason because they've objectively gone and verified what I said. It's not just a matter of, oh, I believe Steve. It's not a matter of tribalism. It's, oh, shit. Yeah, Steve seems to be correct on this. Okay. So I don't expect him to do it. But when Matt actively says things like I'm a prescriptivist when I'm not, or actually strawmans my position, the people that watch this, the people that watch in future episodes and prior episodes and read my blog can say exactly what Lydia did right here. Hey, Matt, why are you lying about Steve? Because, again, I'm not having principle of charity any longer. Before, I think he just didn't understand. I will outright say that I think he's lying at this point because people have told him I'm not a prescriptivist. Stop saying that he is. And stop saying that Steve has these arguments that he's not arguing. I have never gone out there and said, look, you're not a real atheist. And yet Matt says Steve tells atheists they're not really atheists. When has this fucking happened? When? Explain this to me. When the fuck has this happened?
I know you had a discussion with Talk Heathen. Did they ever correct themselves?
I don't think that he did. I don't watch that often, but I told Eric. I even called him on the phone. I was like, hey, Eric, you said I was a prescriptivist, and he agreed with me. I'm not. He read. This is the difference between Eric and Matt, though. Eric actually went to my blog. And he read my positions, and from that he gleaned that, oh yeah, Steve, you're right. I don't think you're a prescriptivist, and I apologize. Okay, great. He was supposed to correct it on air. He never did, and whatever. I'm not going to worry about it too much. The fact that he at least...
Can we get a quick vote in the chat? 1, if you think pencil is better. 2 in the chat if you think pen is better. Thanks. On the other hand, yeah, it might be worthwhile to actually call in to Talk Heathen, because I know somebody was like, well, why don't you call into the Atheist Experience and have that conversation? Because that's not what the Atheist Experience is about. We're not going to fuck around with it. And we're not trolls. We're not going to be assholes and try and fuck around with the show. He's clearly doing the show in a way that discussion would not be conducive on that show. It would just kind of be a shitty thing to do.
I would never bother with that.
We would never do that dumb shit. Yeah. There's no point. But at the same time, it might be worth calling in to Talk Heathen to have that discussion, because they are kind of a little bit more, their show is a little bit more, has a broader discussion topic.
Eric would be more
has like a broader scope in that case. That might be worthwhile.
I happen to like Eric. We actually, like I said, I legit talked to him we used to quite frequently on the phone. He's a really nice guy. I really like the show. I think he's very calm. I don't have to agree with him on everything. He does agree with me on everything. But he was somebody who actually, instead of like Matt, said, okay, Steve, if I got it wrong, tell me how I got it wrong, and I'll fix it. And he at least looked into it and said, yeah, you know what? I screwed the pooch, man. And I respect that. I really, honest to God, whether you believe God exists or not, right? I respect him for that, right? Because he at least took the time to say, yeah, I was wrong about Steve's position, and it won't happen again. Now, did he correct it on air? No. But again, minor point.
Well, you might have just not gotten your position wrong ever since.
Yeah, I mean,
which would be still an
improvement. Yeah. But
so it's like sometimes it's just a matter of like you take what you can get, and it's just like, well, you know what? He said he wasn't going to get my position wrong again, so I'm not going to really have an issue unless he gets my position wrong again. I'm not there to beat
people over the head over crap, right? I mean, it's just, but come on, man.
You mean like they tell people that you are?
Yeah, when Matt's constantly telling people both behind the scenes and on air that I hold these positions that I don't have, that I'm this person who thinks this way that I don't. Enough. Stop it. Because he's had people tell him this, dude, you're getting this shit wrong. Now you just look like somebody who's willfully lying. And I think that's the case. I think at this point, it has to be some kind of deception because he's been told this is not the case. What else explanation is it? It is just, why would he continue to lie about it? I don't know. But
well, I'll put it this way. If that's the case, the same thing that Aaron applies to Kent Hovind that now applies to Matt. And, he's been corrected, he's been told, and he's still saying the same thing, which is exactly the explanation or the position that Aaron takes about Kent. He's been told, and it's been explained to us, he's been corrected. And according to Aaron, and I'm quoting Aaron specifically, if you have been corrected and you do not change your position and continue to run it, you are lying. So by Aaron's definition, Matt is lying.
And it's funny because Aaron actually in his blog said there's only one correct use of atheism. I mean, he's the prescriptivist in all this. That's the most ironic part, right? To him, there's only one correct usage. He has argued that the reason why there's other usages out there in philosophy, and I'm not exaggerating, is some theistic conspiracy, because philosophy has been taken over by theists and they've changed things. That has been his argument. I'm not even exaggerating.
Yeah, and like he has been a little bit prescriptivist about things before. Like in his, he's got a very hard stance. Once he has an opinion, once he has a stance on something, he's very strong on that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So is Steve. And so people are going to butt heads over these things. It's just a matter of you don't need to straw man to butt heads about it, and you don't need to. You didn't even need to have the conversation. He doesn't have to go out of his way to try and downplay or diminish Steve's point or Steve as a person. He doesn't have to address it at all.
Yeah.
But no, and then so he doesn't address it and tries to diminish and brush aside whatever Steve is saying because it's Steve, because he got his, I don't know, he's butthurt. I don't know.
Let me show this because I'll throw it up here because I just found it. So this is actually his blog. So it's just his blog, if you can see it on the outside chat. So he actually even says, it's directed to me, is agnostic also atheist, right? And he calls me Mr. Agnostic. Now, I wrote a reply to this. If you go to my webpage, www.greatdebatecommunity.com, you'll find it. And I did it in a very, almost, it's not really sophistry, but I mean, he's going to call me Mr. Agnostic. I'm going to be a little lighthearted about it, right? Because he didn't even address me by my name, right? Because that shows a little bit of lack of respect, but whatever. But if you read my reply to him,
I mean, people throw a little bit of shade here and there,
right?
And that's okay.
I mean, whatever.
We're adults. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Not a big deal, right? But
I thought it was kind of funny.
I replied to him in kind, right? So yeah, I mean, all right. So he says right here, and this is straight from American Atheist, right? Just right here. To be clear, atheism is not a disbelief in gods or denial of gods. It is lack of belief in gods, which is a pretty prescriptive statement, right? This is not descriptive. This is prescriptive. This is saying this is what it is. There's no other way, in my opinion. And by the way, Arn did kind of change his position on this a little bit, I think, because he was like saying disbelief is not the belief in the negation. And I was like, well, if it's not the belief in the negation, why is American Atheist that you're a member of or board on the board, why are they using it in the same way I use disbelief, which is the epistemic status of believing the negation? It says atheism is not a disbelief, which they mean it as atheism is not a positive belief, right? Now, I disagree with them on that, but at least they're using the word disbelief the way I used. Aaron didn't believe that. He was like, oh, disbelief just means you don't accept. I'm like, no, Aaron, that's not normative. I cited him many different references on this. He didn't care about the academic citations. What he cared about is American Atheist used it the same way I did. And what was he going to do? And by the way, I have another blog. When Matt Dillahunty, a caller, called in and said, hey, I used disbelief in the case of the believes negation. And Matt Dillahunty said, quote, you're wrong. Basically, he's like, you're wrong about that. Disbelief is merely non-acceptance. And the caller's like, no, dude, that's not how it's understood in epistemology or logic, and you have this own private language kind of stuff. So I wrote a blog on that too. But anyways, it says right here, what can you read this? If you can see the outside chat, is that legible?
Well, yeah, I can give me a second. It's cut off a little bit. You've got it. You don't have your thing showing wide enough. The sides.
Oh,
are cut
okay.
off.
I'll read it. Let me see if let me try this. So I need to produce. Okay. This.
Yeah, you run into issues.
It says this. So the dictionary definitions match that of the movement itself, right? Notice the movement, proving that the way the atheists define themselves is the correct usage. When you start talking about correct usages like that, right, there's only one usage to atheism, that's pretty prescriptive because I think there's no one correct usage. I think there's multiple usages. That's been my argument from day one. You gotta
fix your box, dude.
What? I gotta fix my box?
Nobody can... Yeah, look at the outside.
That sounds weird.
You need to fix your box. Yeah, it does.
Giggity. I can...
You've got like a square and nobody can see what... They can only see half of it.
I got you, boo. I got you.
Yeah. Yeah, you run into issues when Matt is saying that no, he's making this argument is dumb because he's telling people how to use words, and when somebody calls in and saying, well, no, I don't use the word this way, I use the word that way, he shuts down the conversation by saying, no, that's not right, you can use the word this way. It's projection. He's trying to force people to have the conversation that he wants to have on his show, which is fine, but he can't tell those people that they're wrong for using the definition that way he is going to say that Steve is wrong for using the definition that way.
Yeah, and it's like by the way, so the different this is funny. This is called This is called argumentium ad dictionarium. But he says so the dictionary definitions match the movement itself. By the way, I have for every one dictionary he finds, I can find 3 that say otherwise, right? I have multiple citations of just regular dictionaries that say
Well, yeah,
atheist.
that's a semantic argument. That's semantic
yeah,
argument.
I was like, look, if you're going to play this game that dictionary says this, which is argumentium ad dictionarium, there's one correct usage from a dictionary. That literally is the fallacy of argumentium ad dictionarium. I could say...
I actually want to specify.
Yeah, I could say, look, here's a dictionary, Merriam-Webster's Learners, says atheist, a person who believes that God does not exist, right? I could quote Oxford. I could quote Merriam-Webster. I've got, I would probably say 24 citations, some of them from dictionaries, that say that it is the positive case. But I'm not using that to say, oh, look, these dictionaries say this, therefore that is the way it must be or is. No, I'm not doing that. Aaron was doing it here by saying this is the correct usage by this one dictionary that I found. No, that's prescriptivism. By the way,
that would be... According to Matt, that would be an appeal to authority fallacy, so Aaron wouldn't be able to do that anyway.
That's a good point. You're right.
Hi, what up? It's me, your boy. This is why people don't like me.
Yeah. Is the dictionary an authority now? Is it better than Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, IEP, all the citations I use?
There is an argument. There is a reasonable discussion to be had here about which usage is more applicable or which usage is better than another one given different circumstances. And that's a discussion to be had. That's a good semantic argument. You can have a discussion about the semantics of words and which one should be used where and why not. But this is a bad semantic argument in that I'm using this word and it can only be this word because this word.
Well, that's not very loud, but you got music
and
in the background?
I guess appeal to authority, apparently. No. I wouldn't call that appeal to authority. I would probably call it not good enough, but I probably wouldn't call it an appeal to authority.
I wouldn't either. Well, by the way, dictionary is not an authoritative source to me, but I guess music in the background? It's not very loud.
Oh, sorry, that's people downstairs.
It's okay. I've got it. It's tuned down, so they're not going to be able to hear it. It's not going to trigger anything. So where we were at here.
We got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It says, what is your position, Steve, what is your position on possibility of true knowledge? I know you aren't a skeptic, but I'd like to know how do you argue against the subjective lens of our understanding?
Yeah, I do think knowledge is possible. I'm not a skeptic. I don't adhere to academic skepticism or Baronian skepticism. Although, I think there's some interesting arguments to be had on skepticism, right? It's been around for a very long time, but I mean, I do take the approach knowledge is obtainable. I do take the approach that the theory of knowledge of justified true belief, or JTP plus, with basically JTP, but it has some kind of truth tracking condition. That's called sensitivity or safety. Deals with possible world theories. But yeah, I mean, I think knowledge is possible. But if he's asking about true epistemic certainty, like in a Cartesian sense, because what's called Cartesian certainty, no, I don't think we can probably have Cartesian certainty in the epistemic sense. However, there are arguments against brain of that. I know Hilary Putnam has a limited language constraint argument of some kind about what we mean by a vat and what we mean by a brain differs if there is some kind of epistemic realm outside of our own understanding and ability to acquire some knowledge. I get that. But yeah, I think when we talk about knowledge, it doesn't require certainty. I take it in what's going to call the weak acceptance case, not in the strong acceptance case. So to me, knowledge doesn't require certainty. But there are some people that do have that constraint. They think that knowledge does require certainty. I particularly don't. But it's kind of fun you mentioned that, because just the other day, Richard Carrier was talking to me, and he said, hey, look, a lot of these problems go away if you just think of knowledge as probabilistically. And I said, okay, if that's the case, because, Richard Carrier loves his Bayesian and stuff, right? He loves his probabilities. And I asked a very simple question. He's like, I'm just tired of explaining this. Okay, whatever. But I said, look, Richard, if you want to accept probabilistically speaking of something of knowledge, okay, then what do you mean by a probability of 1 then? If something has a probability of 1, is that Cartesian certainty or epistemic certainty? Or is it within just the framework of what we mean in our own epistemic limits? And if that's the case, that there is no, because he said you can't hit a probability of 1 with knowledge. I'm like, okay, if I say A equals A, like the law of identity, right? I can never have epistemic certainty of that to a degree to say that is a probability of 1 within the system or external to the system. I didn't know what he meant by that, right? Which I asked him, do you mean within the framework of epistemology? Can you have a probability of 1 that it could be certain that A equals A? Yeah, I think so. Okay. And I do hold a fallibilism, by the way, but fallibilism is more, can you be wrong about something because of the justification for that? I don't think I could be wrong about A equals A. I consider that to be knowledge. I consider that to be certainty, right? That cannot be wrong, because to say that can be wrong implies it must be the case in at least one possible world it is wrong. If it's not a metaphysical necessity where it exists in all possible worlds that A equals A, then in some possible world it doesn't exist that way. And I just can't see that to be the case, right? I mean, how in some possible world can A not equal A? That's a fundamental law of logic. It is a metaphysical necessity based on the laws of logic, right? Or the principles of logic, or the logical verities.
Helios was kind enough to send me a link. Dillahunty says, now if I could learn this trick, my wife would absolutely lose her mind. And then they leaves a link, and then replied to somebody saying, rejection of theistic claims, not negation of. Two options: believe theist or not atheist. Negation is anti-theism.
No, negation, okay, as it's best understood, as what I would say normative.
Here's a link for anybody who cares to double check that what I'm saying is actually what it
says.
And
where's that from?
Matt Dillahunty's Twitter.
A, again, is the negation of the proposition. If the proposition is God exists, then the negation of that, not P, is God does not exist. So when you read something in SCP, this is, again, having an understanding of the concepts to read these things. SCP, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Maybe.
This is why I think it's important to understand the concept. This is why I spent years on my own trying to educate myself on it, try to edify myself, that a lot of people just don't seem to want to do. But the concept is, when an SCP, Dr. Paul Draper from Purdue University, who wrote that in 2017, I've read it many times, what he was saying was that the negation of the proposition, the A is not, meaning what is not P? If P is God exists, then not P is God does not exist. Atheism is the belief that God does not exist. That is what he's saying. And he even explicitly says that atheism in philosophy should be, or ought to be, I think it says should be understood as the belief of the proposition of atheism is true. Something along those lines, right? Which is the belief that God does not exist. Right? So, I mean, I don't know what Matt Dillahunty is trying to say otherwise, because I think he's misunderstanding what Paul Draper is saying. Because he says, quote, therefore, in philosophy at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, that the proposition that there are no gods, right? The proposition that there are no gods. That is atheism as he's describing this in Stanford Encyclopedia, which is, by the way, peer-reviewed. And by the way, people, no, I don't just use SEP. I just find it to be a very concise, peer-reviewed source that I think is very good. But I also use IEP, I use Oxford, I use Stanford, I use books, I use papers. I have citations galore just of people that have written peer-reviewed papers. But Stanford is pretty well recognized. It is pretty well respected. And you can't just say, look, here's Dr. Draper, here's a peer-reviewed paper, it's wrong by fiat. Explain why it's wrong. Because you would do that if I quoted somebody quoting the Journal of Medicine, and I said, look, Journal of Medicine's wrong. Would you say, oh, well, okay, I believe you? No, you're going to say, well, why it's wrong? But Matt Dillahunty doesn't do that. He never explains why Paul Draper is wrong on this, ever. So, I mean, it's just weird to me. It's weird. It's weird when somebody like Matt says, evidence, 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 show me your evidence. And then when I say, okay, Matt, show me your evidence, I get bumpkiss.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of, like, it's a double standard, which is the real problem with it. It's a double standard of that, well, he's expecting other people to show evidence all of the time. That's the main argument that he usually makes. Well, convince me. Well, okay, but at that point, if you're going to make a claim, if you're going to claim that, well, Steve is wrong, you can't just say Steve is wrong and then not demonstrate the claim. Right? Like that follows, right? If he's going to say that, well, if you make a claim, therefore you have to justify that claim and you have to explain that claim, he's making a claim and he's not justifying it. There's a double standard here.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. And by the way, could you just read exactly? Helios sent it to me, so I'm going to read it myself here. But unfortunately, he doesn't have me blocked, so I got to. So Matt Dillahunty in this one tweet says. And this is from 2013. Rejection of the theist claims, not negation of. Two options: believe or not atheist. Negation is anti-theism. Okay, so in this particular case, Matt Dillahunty in 2013, I'm going to show it over here. Helios is right. By the way, hey Helios, we asked you for evidence. What did you do? Oh my God, he provided evidence. What the concept?
What a concept!
Wow. But so negation is anti-theism. So he's basically saying in this particular thing, and again, he may have revised his positions. Who the fuck knows, right? But he says strong atheism, the belief that God does not exist, is anti-theism. I disagree with him on that. On that. I totally disagree with him on that. But again, Randolph Richardson, who's the head of the Atheist Alliance in International Canada or whatever, he thinks the same thing. He thinks strong atheism is synonymous with anti-theism. And I know other people have thought that as well. I certainly don't hold that to be the case. I've never read that to be the case. I think I'm going to take that back. I think in one place, I think it has said something along the lines that people have used it that way, but that's just descriptive, right? So.
Well, yeah. But it's almost like you're not a prescriptivist.
Yeah, shocker, right? But yeah, I think that's Helios. Good for demonstrating your thing there. Bravo, man. Oh, by the way,
yeah.
I didn't show it to the outside.
But this
chat.
is what happens.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is how you get discussion, by having a back and forth, not just shutting down the conversation because you don't want to talk about it. If you don't want to talk about that, don't bring it up. If you don't want to discuss Steve and his arguments, stop bringing up Steve and his arguments. The problem is that Matt's got himself in a catch-22, where he's been saying this so often that people are starting to go back to him being like, well, this does not seem to be the case. Can you please explain yourself? Correct. He can't just drop it now because he's been going on about it. Like, you can't, that's not how that works, unfortunately. When you address something like that publicly too many times.
Hard to backtrack on
and
that,
get
right?
it so wrong. Yeah. You can't just stop talking about it, especially when what you're discussing is the thing that you discuss all the time, right? So it's like, even if he stops bringing up Steve or he stops talking about Steve's argument in particular, he's still making the same argument of using the definitions that he's using. So he kind of got himself into a position where he sort of has to kind of address the contention with that. Realistically, it would be more interesting, I think, if more theists took a look at the argument and brought it to him, because he might be more willing to listen to
Yeah, it's so funny because theists I don't think any theist has disagreed with me that a recent time that I can think of. And then people are, when the argument, well, Steve, you're just helping theists because they all agree with you. I'm like, well, maybe because they're actually doing their due diligence and they're actually thinking about it critically. Wow, what a concept.
You can't blame theists for picking up on a good argument against a bad atheistic argument.
I agree. Absolutely.
Why would that make no sense? Make your argument better. That's not
but then they're like, oh, Steve's now a theist. By the way, people that have actually run these arguments and explained these people, they've been accused of being theist. And it's like, they're like, wait a minute, no, I'm a hard atheist. I know people that are like satanic. They're like, wait a minute, are you kidding me? So it's like, you're going to think that I'm a theist? I had this happen in my own Facebook group, the Great Debate Community on Facebook. Again, link in the video description. That some guy was just like, you need to show me proof of your God. And I'm like, have you met me? Do you even know the fuck who I am to think that kind of stupid fucking claim? He's like, I don't. First of all, I don't have to prove to you a goddamn thing. And second of all, I'm not even a fucking theist. By the way, we're so demonetized.
I want to gently touch on something. Chemo said, I'm mad that the ACA claims the right to call me an atheist when I'm not an atheist. Too. And I want to touch on something really, really gently, and just a gentle reminder, and then people can kind of figure it out from there. What was the issue that they had with rationality rules? Do you guys recall? I'm not asking for an actual answer. This is rhetorical. Do you guys recall that issue, and that they're very stringent on making sure the way someone identifies is very, very important to them?
But it doesn't apply to us.
But, no, I'm not going to go ahead and make that kind of
special pleading.
I'm just noticing like a little nugget of, doesn't this seem weird? I'm not going to go ahead and say that they're doing anything, and I'm not trying to compare these issues to these issues. I'm just saying that the logic used for this one should also be applied to the logic used to this one, probably.
And when they say, oh, well, yeah, Steve can identify as an agnostic, and Kimamaki can identify as agnostic, but you know what? That answers a different question. The fuck it does. Stop saying that. It does not answer a different question. It is literally, in this particular case, and by the way, let me talk about the word literally real quick, because it may be my pet peeve that I haven't brought up before. Matt Dillahunty.
You mean figuratively?
No, I meant literally. Matt Dillahunty once put a tweet out saying Steve doesn't know what literally means. Again, that's prescriptivism, because literally, if you go look into the word, has been in common parlance accepted to mean something that is not literal, right? It means figuratively in certain contexts. That's how it's used in general parlance. So Matt Dillahunty prescriptively had said Steve doesn't know what literally means because he takes it as something as, literally to mean literally, which, okay, but that is prescriptivism that doesn't take into account that people will use the word literally to not actually mean literally. What is that called? Prescriptivism. The irony here blows my fucking mind. And by the way, not a correct use of irony. But again, irony the same way. Yeah. This is why I'm a descriptivist. People, you know what? Nobody knows what the fuck the word irony means. Nobody, right? But actually I do. An irony would be like if you have a stop sign, right? And it says the word go on it. That's irony. But anyways.
Yeah. Well, if you want, there are also different kinds of irony. There's like a literary irony,
absolutely.
And there's different kinds of irony. But like a really good example is like, wow, what is that song? It's like rain on your wedding day. Isn't it ironic?
That's not irony.
Don't you think?
I love her, but that's not irony.
None of the things in there are ironic. They're all coincidence.
Yeah. That's Alanis Morissette. Yeah, those are not ironies. Yeah. And by the way, I did like that song. But yeah,
it's a good song. It's just wrong.
It's just wrong. But you know what? It's poetic license, right?
It's a great teaching
so
tool.
when Matt says, well, Steve doesn't know what literally means, I'm like, oh, the fuck I don't. I do understand what literally is used and means and whatever, and I don't think it's a intrinsic meaning. But by you saying I can't use it to actually have an emphasis of figuratively, then you're being a prescriptivist.
The whole song is ironic. Yeah, that would be the way it is. The way it is, the whole song is actually ironic. It's just irony. That it's not the situation she's not talking about are not irony.
People get, like, for example, the same thing they use envy and jealousy, right? Jealousy is when you are afraid somebody's going to take something away from you, right? If I have a wife or something like that, and somebody flirts with her, you get jealous. Envy is what somebody else has, right? If somebody has a really hot wife and you're envious of it, that's envy. That's not jealousy. When people say, "Oh, you're just jealous of Steve," no, because they mean envious. Right? It's not they those words. But you know what? I don't give a fuck. I don't sit there and go, I really care one way. I'll try to explain it sometimes. Just go, oh, well, this is generally what it is. So maybe they don't run across an actual prescriptivist. But do you think I give a fuck one way or another? Not really. I don't. Right? Because I know what they mean by it. Right? That's not how a prescriptivist would act. A prescriptivist is like, "Oh, you're an idiot. You're using these words incorrectly." I'm like, whatever. But I mean, at least I might explain to them, say, yeah, I think you mean this. And they go, okay, great. But I'm not going to argue with them. I don't give a shit, right? Y'all jealous of me, bitches. Yeah, literally, again, they mean envious. In this case, I think they actually is literally. But then again, words have usages. And Matt sits there and just says.
Or they ironically mean jealousy. Yeah, but they're saying it ironically.
But doesn't Matt actually sit there and say words have usages? Not meanings, and I agree with them. They don't have any kind of intrinsic meaning. They have usages. And so we actually agree upon that, and yet he fucking all the time says I'm wrong on this shit. Oh, by the way, okay, and then
it's not applying the same. You're not applying the standard to this thing that you apply to other stuff.
Yeah.
It applies to you, but it doesn't apply to Matt, right? Like Matt,
weird, right?
That's the problem. Like, he can do it, but nobody else is allowed to do it. And like that, like, dude, just don't. Maybe just not. Not is an option. You can just not.
It's funny that in the same stream, which I'm gonna play this video real quick.
Nobody here is trying to change your argument or how you decide. No. Like, this isn't an art. We're not talking about whether you should be labeled as one or should be labeled as the other. That completely misses the point. That's the exact opposite of what we're trying to talk about.
So in that same stream, which I'll play for you guys here in a second, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But I think the stream should be out there so people can see it. He actually admits that he doesn't say agnostic. He says with a G, Gnostic Atheist. He says Gnostic Atheist in the weak case doesn't make any sense. He's like the hardcore agnostics, meaning me, which is not the case. Another misunderstanding that Matt has. I don't go around trying to convert people to agnosticism. I don't give a fuck. I'm not an agnostic advocate.
No.
Okay, I'm not an agnostic apologist. All right, but he's like, the one thing that the hard agnostic get, which I guess he means me, is that the term Gnostic atheist in the weak case makes no sense because knowledge is associated belief. He's absolutely right on that. I mean, he agrees with me on that. And he also has said to Anthony Magnabosco, agnostic atheism doesn't make much sense either, right? He thinks that's nonsensical in the weak case. He thinks these epistemic modifiers like agnostic and Gnostic only make sense if atheism is used in the strong case. But then goes around saying, well, we don't use atheism in the strong case. We only use it in the weak case. Right? It's like, well, you got people out there going, yeah, I'm an agnostic atheism in the weak case, and Matt Dillahunty goes, well, that's nonsensical, and I go, that's nonsensical, and they're like, oh, well, you both are ignorant. Okay, whatever. Super chat, then I'll play the video.
Helios57545 says the live chat is jealous of Steve because we are afraid he will steal Chesh from us. Chesh is ours. You have sweet heathen, Steve. No being greedy.
You know what I got? I got me, baby. I got me, and you're all.
I belong to the live
y'all
chat.
Envious. Yeah, y'all. What is it? I get some like bills and just All right, so let's play this video real quick. Yeah.
I'm Chat's waifu.
All right, so I've got this video here, and I'm going to put it right here, and we're going to play it real quick, and hopefully you guys can hear it. So here we go.
12 minutes behind. Use the philosophical definition of atheist, believe no God exists, or we are bad as theists using the colloquial meaning of theory. You probably know who I'm talking about. Steve McRae is wrong. If he's just going to say that I'm stupid when he's being prescriptivist about definitions, I would point out that language is our bitch, and evidently so is Steve McRae. If you use a label and you clearly identify what you mean by that label, the only thing somebody can say is you're using a non-standard or an atypical definition. And when the bulk of the atheist community understands and acknowledges a weak atheist and strong atheist position, that's the only part where the hardcore agnostic advocates get it right is saying that you can't be a Gnostic weak atheist. That's technically correct.
Okay, so let's break that down real quick, and Chesh, you can hear it in the live chat there. So let's break that down real quick. First, like I said, he says I'm prescriptivist. I'm not. But I never called him stupid. I don't think he's stupid for thinking anything. That, again, I don't understand his reasoning on that. But it's not a matter that the atheist communities understand these things. My argument has always been that is, like I said, atypical, right? Because the question is about typicality in, is that a word? If not, I made it up. Yeah, whatever. Again, not a prescriptivist. I don't give a shit. But that in the normative way atheism is thought of in academia and philosophy is in the strong case. I mean, that's generally how it's always been for the last 400 years. There's been no change in that. Now, people can argue, hey, I don't like that. I think philosophy it should change it. Okay, make your arguments. I disagree hugely, but make your arguments for it. But to say that Steve's wrong about how it's generally understood, that just makes no sense to me. But I've never prescribed usages to it. I don't say you have to use these terms, right? I don't. That's just where Matt just goes off the rails because that's completely
okay.
wrong.
So yeah, he's missed the argument because actually I think that was me that made that argument, and it was that if you are telling people that they are an atheist and saying that, well, no, I'm just using this term that way and I'm not using the terms that are used in the field, then it is the same as a theist saying that evolution is just a theory because they're using a colloquial definition of theory. And then you say, oh, well, no, you can't, that's not what we mean. And this is the definition we're using. It's okay to do that. And just like it's also okay for Steve to say, well, no, you run into problems with that. You run into category errors with that, which you do if you do this for biology and for evolution. And you do if you do this when you're responding to or you're describing what an atheist or an agnostic is. So it's the same thing. And that's why it's the same thing. Matt doesn't give a reason as to why it's not. He just says that's bullshit. And it's like, okay, so if that is, and you can't do that, and you can't specify, or it's not okay for us to specify, then there is absolutely no way that Matt can get around ever telling any theist ever that saying evolution is just a theory is incorrect.
That was my argument. Right, and by the way,
they're allowed to.
There's projection going on here because for some odd reason, and I have no idea in the world why, he thinks I go around telling atheists are not really atheist. No true atheism fallacy kind of thing. That's not the case. But he's willing to go around saying, well, Steve's an agnostic, therefore he's atheist. I mean, Seth, what's his name? Seth. Oh my God. Seth Andrews. He's like, well, Steve, you're an atheist. Well, no, I'm not. Stop trying to label. Now I realize he's poking the bear a little bit, right? I understand he's doing, and I respect him. I like Seth, and I realize he's just. Digging.
By the way, Steve, chat's saying I'm too loud. Did you change his setting?
I turned you down.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had a higher for the video, but I turned it down right afterwards.
You turned it up, yeah.
So when Matt says, "Look, there's only atheism or theism, therefore Steve's an atheist," excuse me, he's the one doing it to me. He's the one changing my label. Right? And he's the one that says, well, labels not important. Concepts are. Okay, then why does he not explain to people the concepts? Why does he not say, oh, yeah, Steve is correct in philosophy, in academia, this is what these terms generally are held to. Steve's not wrong on that. Where's the fucking argument to be had? I don't understand what the fuck he's arguing about. Except Steve's just wrong by fiat. Steve's a big, meanie poopy head. Okay, but am I wrong in what I've been telling people to explain these concepts? If I am, show me. I will correct it. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I've been corrected on things and say, you know what, you're right. Let me fix that. And you know what I do? I go on the next stream and go, hey, I made a mistake last time. Let me correct it. Not a big fucking deal.
It's the same thing as lumping together faith and faith. So theists will present faith as a necessity, and they'll describe faith as a simile to trust. You've experienced this, therefore you can trust that it's going to happen this way again. But then they change the term. They use the same word, but they change the meaning of that word. But they're using it in a different way, even though they just described it this way. That's sneaky, and that's not okay. It doesn't mean you can't use faith to mean one, the other, or both. It means that it's not cool to switch halfway through a conversation, that they're not equatable definitions. That's not the same thing. So if you're, and it's okay to call stuff like that out. It's okay to be wrong about stuff like that, but that's not what Steve is doing. And Steve would agree that it's okay to do that, and Matt would agree that it's okay to do that. But so why is Matt saying that Steve can't do that in this other field?
And by the way, the Intrigue Feline says, I can confirm you have changed your mind on some things that I brought up. Yeah, hey, Intrigue Feline messages me, and she'll make a good argument about something, and I'll go, okay, yeah. Guess what? You changed my mind. Okay, it happens. Look, if you go your whole life and you don't change your mind, you are not a very critical thinker. You have to change your positions every so often as you progress. That's the sign to me of a good critical thinker. It's called virtue epistemology, that you have open-mindedness as a virtue in virtue epistemology. That's something that we all should have. We should be able to change our position. I'm not inflexible and transitive. I will change my position, right? And Matt loves that too. Give me enough evidence, I'll change my position. What the fuck else he wants? I have pages and pages and pages and pages of what I'm saying is the correct thing. But then he says, oh, well, you know what? Fuck all that. Steve's wrong because he's arguing this, which I go, no, I'm not. That's a bait and switch.
There's a Mike makes an interesting point in the chat. He says, I honestly feel it's more that you are talking past each other. Let me go to the next one. He says 3 things. I honestly feel like you guys are talking past each other, and Matt is sick of giving all the qualifiers for his definition, not saying that's fair though. And then lastly, it said only if you're wrong, which has yet to ever happen to me.
I understand how he's using the terms. I'm not ignorant, and what's funny is I think he knows how I'm using it.
It's not talking past each other, and
I don't think it is either.
Why it's not. Matt is still trying to have this discussion without having. He's talking about how he shouldn't have to have the discussion without addressing the discussion, right? Which is ridiculous, and it's ridiculous because he's bringing it up. He's talking about it on a regular basis. If I'm sitting here and I'm talking about density and buoyancy are what make that it's not really gravity, it's density and buoyancy. And then Steve's going to respond with, well, no, it's gravity. Let me show you the equation. Or how does gravity work in that case? Or the gravity does work in this case. And I just say, well, Steve's just wrong and he's stupid. Or if a better example might be if I say, this is gravity, this is how it works. And somebody responds with, well, no, it's density and buoyancy. Because of
reasons.
You can't tell me that I have to use the word. You can't tell me that I have to use the word gravity. And because this is what I observe. And then I go ahead and say, well, what you're observing has errors, and here are these errors. And you just say, well, no, and then straw man whatever I just said to say that, well, now I don't have to address it. Well, this is the equivalent. This is the same thing. It's
yeah. I mean, these terms, these words have certain usages in fields for reasons to avoid ambiguity. Now, is that always the case? No.
No, it's not at this point. Yeah, no, it's not a talking past. He has goals and he wants to reach those goals, which is fine. However, it's not talking past when he is at this point purposefully strawmanning Steve so he doesn't have to address issues with his own argument. That's not talking past. That's purposeful.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, go look at objective and subjective in philosophy. You'll get 6 different people using it 6 different ways in the same paper. Even it's confusing. So, yeah. But anyways, you know, I think we've kind of like gone down this pretty well actually. I do have. So somebody who said they were accidentally blocked, I will fix that. Don't worry about that. I'm trying to take care of it as we speak. You know who you are. I'll take care of that like right after the thing here. So let's wrap it up. Thanks, Chesh. This was fun. And again, you know, Chesh and I had some good discussions on these things. That's what I want to see more of, right? I want to have people having the actual dialogue rather than sit there and have to correct Matt every time he gets my shit wrong. Because it's just dishonest.
Well, like I said, we got to some far more interesting conversation once we got past this point. But when we have to get past it every time, it's not very productive. So essentially what we're meaning, I think, by the end of the day is, Matt, have the discussion or don't have the discussion. Stop preventing other people from having the discussion. And if you don't have to have it, that's fine, but you're being a detriment. Stop being a detriment.
Yeah, because exactly, and the biggest reason he's a detriment is because people just look to him and whatever says Matt says must be true. It's tribalism, and it makes it more difficult for me when I'm actually trying to have honest dialogues with people, and then people are like, oh, you're just dishonest, Steve. Show me then, for fuck's sake. I mean, they literally just sit there and say you are dishonest, and then I say, well, why? Well, because you can only be theist or atheist. Why? Oh, because Matt Dillahunty says so. No, that doesn't work for me. Show me that's metaphysical necessity. Good luck with that.
So there's the shills are going live soon, and as well, Red's Rhetoric and Astronomy Live are going live to look at some SpaceX updates.
Busy day today. Busy day today.
Busy day. I'm kind of upset because Red's Rhetoric and fucking Astronomy Live scheduled on top of me when they knew
stepped
I
on
was
you.
supposed to be going live with OPT Lawyer to talk about some of the non sequitur show stuff, but not really the non sequitur show stuff. We're actually going to be looking at the dumb comments that people have been leaving on the non sequitur show.
So real quick, are you going to wait for them real quick? I mean, are you rescheduling? And by the way, Dave Dallafor, good to see you in my live chat. It's been a while. I hope you're doing okay. Mr. Dave Dallafor. And by the way, Dave Dallafor, you don't know him, but he goes way back in the Great Debate community, and so
everybody who goes to see Red's Rhetoric being on, tell him that he's bullying me and he stepped on my toes and that he's a big meanie poopy head.
And by the way, Wise Guy, sorry about that.
Oh, and Astronomy Live, because they're doing it together.
Both of
them.
Wise Guy, I had a rogue mog, and I'm still fixing it. At the time, I thought it was only a couple dozen people that. But there's probably like 4 dozen people that he actually got. But at the time, it was only a dozen. So I am updating that. It's probably about 4 dozen or so. This guy said there was like 500 people. He literally said he blocked 500 people. It wasn't 500 people. I don't even have 500 people on my list. There was like 100 to begin with.
I feel like you would notice a 500 people drop in sub.
Right. It's that didn't happen. So, well, I did have about 500 drop in sub, but it wasn't because of that. But it was because I stopped dealing with a bunch of shitty people, and so I'm happy with that. Look, I'm not going to sit here and have a channel that's just driven by views. It's never going to happen. It's just not what I want. Because I had some people, I
guess.
Well, I had somebody put today say, Steve, if you stop talking about this philo stuff, you probably get more subs. I'm like, fuck that. That's not, really? No, bullshit.
Well, I guess this stuff with Matt would be considered drama.
I don't think so.
But what we're trying to do is not have drama with him. Yeah. We're actively trying to address what he said, correct what he said, and explain to people the potential problems with this. We're not actually trying to just fling shit back and forth. We're not sitting here saying he's our bitch, and we're not sitting here throwing shit and saying he's... Well, we kind of called him a liar a little bit, but we called him a liar based on R and Ra's definition. So, I mean, you can take that or leave it as you will, but we're not straw manning him. We're trying to steel man his argument as best as we can. So, I mean, it's kind of drama-ish, but it's not drama on our end. We're trying to make it as little drama as
I'll
possible.
throw in I'll throw in that OPT lawyer video that you're going to have tonight in the video description so people can go watch it after the fact and go to your channel.
Well, we might just
Oh, do it tonight. I want to watch it.
Well, I mean, I'm okay with giving it a little bit more time just to get a little bit more comments on the videos.
I'm not going to watch Astronomy Live and Reds. I want to watch you and OPT and laugh at the comments. All right, you guys decided. But anyways, like, subscribe this channel.
Okay.
If you guys are new to this channel, a lot of new people, please subscribe.
What if you guys want to come and watch me? I mean, you guys want me to reschedule?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I said 1 in the chat if you want me to go today, 2 in the chat if you want me to go on another day, so you can watch both live.
Yeah, I'd rather watch you. So let's go live today. But yeah, like I said, it's been rough with the subs, and I don't really push this channel that much. So if you want to sub to this, you're going to get a lot of content, but it's mostly going to be science, philosophy, and other stuff. But somebody had said, well, I miss the days of debates. It's like that. Yeah, well, that's not really what I'm interested in in doing those debates, because you know what? They bored the shit on me. Let James do it on Modern Debate. He does a great job. I'll have the after shows. But I don't do a lot of the stuff for other people. I do it for myself on my channel. I always have been like that. I'm not going to cater to other people. But yeah, we'll get back into some of the debates as well. But right now we're in a period of transition, and we're saving a lot of stuff from the Non Sequitur Show channel. So I've got 2 channels now, this channel and the New Debate Community channel. But the content I want to have on this particular channel isn't that format any longer. That's just a decision I have. There might be some times that we do, but yeah, if you're here for that kind of debate stuff, you're probably going to be disappointed, and yeah, don't sub. But if you like, the content that we do put out to try to promote critical thinking, scientists come on and philosophers come on, and that kind of stuff, then you probably really like this channel. So, fair enough, Chesh? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're switching a little bit more from it's debate / discussion. Yeah. So bring your position, have a couple minutes to talk about the decision and then start going at each other, because I think we get really tired of people not actually bringing a position.
Yeah, and that's why when I listen to like a lot of stuff
which is me, I don't bring a position usually. I'm that dick. I totally admit that I am an asshole, and I am absolutely a hypocrite in that. It's really frustrating when somebody doesn't bring their own argument, but I tend to be the person but I'm also not interested in debate. I'm interested in discussion. So I'd rather have somebody present something to me, and then I can try to understand their position better, so that way I can then make a position.
# School of Tea Jump. Yeah. All right. So, and let me know if you guys did subscribe. I mean, in the live chat, say that you're new to the channel. I'd like to see if we get some new people coming in. We're trying to expand a little bit, but again, been really difficult because of a whole bunch of stuff that's been going on. But check out Cheshire's video with OPT Lawyer if she does it today, because they're going to read comments about people that think they know about the law that do not, which should be really fun and interesting.
It's pretty glorious. It's pretty glorious. So yeah, I gotta get in contact with him. I got about an hour before that will go live. I'll probably set it up as soon as we're done here. I just have to do an update on my computer because an update came through. Yeah,
I had that. Yeah, I had it myself, and I hate having to postpone it every single time. So leave some comments in the video description. I really look forward to reading comments. Comments have been really light lately, which may be a good thing, but at the same time, I look forward to reading them. I can't respond to all of them. But if you do respond to this and you think that I'm wrong, or you think Matt Dillahunty's right, all I ask is that you bring some evidence and you bring some good argumentation, and don't write me 5,000 fucking paragraphs. I'm not going to read all that. Make it succinct, make it, paragraph or 2 at most, and make it reasonable. But if you start going out, Stevie, you're just a mean poopy head that doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, blah, 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 you're just going to get removed from my channel. I am that kind of content creator where I don't deal with fuckery. I don't deal with people that just want to come along and troll. I'd rather talk to the people that are interested in this stuff, that want to learn, because those are the ones that have made a difference in the community, because now they go on and they do better in the discussions. And that's the whole goal of what Chesh and I have been trying to do for quite some time now, right? Have better discussions.
Yeah, we're trying to help. At the end of the day, we might come across as harsh, but we're trying to help. We're not trying to like ruin Matt Dillahunty's career.
Well, like we could.
We're trying to help.
Yeah, like we could. But yeah, I want Matt Dillahunty to realize basically that he keeps getting my positions wrong. I'm not a prescriptivist. I don't go around telling atheists that they're not really atheists. Just stop it. It makes him look like he doesn't have any understanding of my actual positions. And that's not how you treat somebody. Because I would never try to misrepresent him. In fact, I go out of my way to make sure this is how Matt Dillahunty actually thinks. I had asked Matt Dillahunty in prior to one of our shows when he was debating inspired philosophy, I'd asked him, hey, Matt, I heard that's your position. Is this your position? I want to clarify. And he did agree with that. And I was like, okay, because I didn't want to strawman him. So isn't too much to ask that he has the same respect to me and no longer strawmans me. Is it really that much when I gave him that consideration? Honestly?
Apparently, yes.
As of right now, it seems to be so, right? So anyways, good night, guys. And we'll see you on Monday, I guess, right? Oh, I do have a monitor debate on Sunday. Go check it out.
An hour on my show.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Jumping ahead. But monitor debate, I am going to be doing a debate with Snake was right on this very topic. So if you can't get enough of it, there you go. But the reason why I'm doing it with him, because he says I'm wrong. And I'm like, okay, let's see what you got. Show me that I'm wrong, because I'm really to say, hey, look, I'm wrong. Go ahead, show me. But you know how many people have done it in all these years? Night.
See you guys soon, and make sure to go bug Astronomy Live and Reds for me.
Good night, guys.